And we are live with today's 220-11-02 Core 2 A Plus study group. I'm just settling in. Looks like I'm trying to get things together today. Let's see. I got headphones are in. This looks good. You know what we're not doing is recording. So let's record. I've not even done my podcast audio yet, but we'll do that later. That's or we'll do it now. Do I have time? I think I have time. All right, that's that. We can cool this down a little bit. That looks better. What else we got here? That looks good. Close this out. Hey, chat room. Hey, everybody. Let's pop out the chat. Pop out the chat. Pop out the chat. There we go. Works great. Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. We are just a few minutes away from getting started. Stream help needs to go here. That looks good. Where is my podcast audio? Because I do need to say that like real quick on here. I can find that. I'll find it here. It's podcast, right? If you were a podcast, where would you be? You'd be right there. And then I have to do the hard part of figuring out what day it is because I have to write everything down or else I'm in big trouble. That's why you'll sometimes see me. In fact, you see this on news all the time where somebody puts the wrong thing on a teleprompter, but you're just talking and you don't know what you're saying at that point because other people are talking in your ear and there's a thing going on over here and you don't realize you said something wrong. So let's see if I can say this properly, and that will at least be synced up for the podcast. Let's pause this because that's in my light. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer 220-11-02 Core 2 A Plus study group. This study group was recorded on May 11th, 2023. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. I'm James Messer, and you're listening to the Professor Messer 220-11-02 Core 2 A Plus Study Group After Show. This after show was recorded on May 11th, 2023. If you'd like to watch a video replay, visit my website at professormesser.com. Yes, I know I could easily cut and paste some of that, but what fun would that be, right? Tone that down a little bit. Gosh, people already checking in, like Matthew. Thanks, Matthew, with the no message there, but a $10, a $5 super chat. Thank you so much for the super chat and for saying hello and for checking in and for being here. There's some other folks that are here as well. We got folks that are checked in from Brazil. We got folks checking in from Fort Worth, the Tacoma, Washington. Is that a place? Did I say it right? Did I say it wrong? We'll figure it out. We'll get started at the top of the hour. We got about 5 minutes. Let's check other things. We got recordings going on here. South Florida's checking in on 305. What's up, 305? Down at the Cayocho, down on the big curve of the 826. We've got Scotland is here, and Ghana, and North Texas, and Denver, and Utah, and the UK. Let's check and make sure those are here. Those are here. You know what I haven't checked yet is to make sure that this was communicating. And it is. Look at that. That's it. Yeah, that's 826 never got any better, has it? It's the same every time. Well, what are you going to do? There's not much you can do. There's only so much room. They can't make it bigger. I guess they could, but that would be super expensive because you'd have to take away things from both sides. It would just be a mess. LA's here, South Africa, Germany, Indianapolis, Denver is here, Collegeville, PA, welcome. I don't know if the drivers are getting worse is because I'm not sure that's possible. There's a whole physics problem there. And I guess it could potentially be worse if everything was just on fire. That's how it could be worse. That's it. Matthew again with the Matthew with this $5 super chat. Thank you also, Matthew. Matthew says in all caps, and I agree, buy the course notes and exams. That's why I passed the 1101. Well, congratulations on your 1101. Thank you for saying nice things about the course notes and exams. I worked very hard on those to make sure they were just right. And it does take time to put those together, and literally months of that. Matthew says it was caps lock. I tend to feel, Matthew, and said it was enthusiasm. It was not a caps lock. You really did want to put it in all caps. That's how I feel anyway. We got a couple of minutes left. These are good questions also. We can talk about these in the after show. Stick around for that, because Titan says, how do I overcome the anxiety of taking the 1101? And a valid question, because taking the exams it can really play with your mind. I'm one of those people that I just don't do well during an exam. So that's why I'm with you when it comes to anxiety. And I have a few tips about anxiety. So someone remind me in the after show, because I just don't have anything here to write on, to talk about taking exams, anxiety, and some of the things that I do to kind of get me in a better place when I get into the exam room. The deep breathe. I don't know if I do. I don't do deep breathing exercises, although it might not be a bad idea. But there are some things you can do in the exam room that are sanctioned by CompTIA that will give you some opportunities to help with that anxiety. And I will tell you what I do when I go to these exams. It's nothing exciting. It's not like a remarkable thing, but I can at least give you my perspective of what I do. And it starts the day before. So stick around for the after show. I'll tell you what I do the day before, the day of, and in the exam room that helps me with anxiety. Because I think that's something we all go through to some degree. Everybody's a little nervous about their exams. Anxiety can really wrap you up a little bit. So I am all about talking about some of my ideas around that, and they might help you as well. All right, we got a minute to go before we get started. You know, I did not check the questions this time, so who knows if they're right or wrong. Let me quickly. I know if they're right or wrong. Is that the first question? That's the correct question. Let's see. If it is, yes, it is. So I think I might be synced up. We might be okay. We might be all right with this. All right. There's a lot of I read the chat room's telling me there's a lot of stuff on this desk. There is. I partially apologize and partially am extremely proud of it. So this is the system I use 24/7. These are my two main screens. The two over here that are sort of the live streaming piece, those are never on. They just sit there. So in the normal day, it's not quite this battle station-y. But in the it does. I really should bring up a third monitor. I talked about that in the last live stream. Having a third monitor would be pretty great for the things I'm doing. And one of these days, I'm just going to plug it in and get it working and work through that. With that, it's the top of the hour. It's time for a live stream. Slides are up. Recordings are going. Streaming is up and running. It's time to make this thing happen. Let's get this in and get it started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2023 Professor Messer Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA A+ exam, and we'll see if you are here. If you are here live, we'll see if you're able to answer those questions, see how well you do. If you're watching this on the replay, stick around as well, because you can follow along with us to see how you might do. I've got a lot of information to go through in this study group. We'll start first with telling you how you can participate if you are here live. What you want to do is pop open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. That QA that's there is for questions and answers, obviously. And as I put questions up on the screen, you simply need to just stay on that page. You don't have to touch anything once you browse to professormesser.com/QA. I also have an app you can use for this. It's not really my app. It's an app from the service we use called Socrative. So the Socrative app is one that will require you to put in a name of a room. And so you'll see a prompt there. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. If you do that, all one word, I think you will find there is a question waiting for you on the screen. And if this question looks familiar, That's because it should. It's a question I pulled from last month. This is the only time you'll see some old questions on here, but I like to do my first question as a rewind question to see not only are you able to remember what we did last month, but let's see if the Q&A process is working well for you. You can get in there and have a look at what happens to be available. This is the question you should see on your screen. It says, during startup, a Windows computer shows the message, one or more services failed to start. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this message? Would it be an invalid startup device was selected, an invalid VLAN assignment, a bootloader replaced or changed, incorrect service permissions, or outdated UEFI BIOS? The question again, during startup, a Windows computer shows the message, one or more services failed to start. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this message? Is it invalid startup device selected, invalid VLAN assignment, bootloader replaced or changed, incorrect service permissions, or outdated UEFI BIOS? Now, if you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. As always, in our live streams, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll try to answer this online, and we'll see how we did with this question in just a moment. Thanks for being here. We, of course, are going through all of the topics from the 220-1102 exam today. And when we're not here live, there's all kinds of content that we've created and brings everything back to the live stream itself. You can have a look at our YouTube page. YouTube, of course, has all of our training videos. You just simply go to the page and watch. There's no registration. There's nothing extra you have to do. They're all there and ready for you. I also have daily A+ pop quiz questions. You can find them on Twitter. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on LinkedIn. To get to all of these sites, you simply type in professormesser.com/the name of that particular location. So that is where you want to be. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube or /Twitter or /Instagram or /LinkedIn, etc., etc. So we've got plenty to step through, but that is something that can really, really be helpful if you're trying to find additional information, additional content, or maybe some extra study materials. Those are great links to try. Today, we're going to talk specifically about topics that are in the 220-1102 exam. That is the second exam you have to take out of two. Although it may be the first exam you take. You can take these in either order. So this is one that was released on April the 20th of 2022, which means it's probably going to be around somewhere around until November of 2025. That's probably a good guess anyway. As we get closer to the retirement timeframe, CompTIA will begin to give us official dates on all of those. The 220-1102 exam is a 90-minute exam. You might get a maximum of 90 questions, and you need to get a score of 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. So that's our goal, is to walk into the room and know everything we need to know about operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, or operational procedures. So all of that can really be helpful if you're someone who's trying to find what do I need to study for this exam. It's those 4 different domains, and all the questions on your exam will come from those particular domains. I also have a replay available to us for this study group, and it's all on my website. There's an audio-only replay that I publish in podcast format, and that podcast can be found at professormesser.com/podcast. You'll find on that page podcast links for my A+, my Network Plus, and my Security Plus study groups, and they're separated out by the main first hour Q&A and the after show in our second hour, because we have a lot of great information in our, not only our primary first hour, but the secondary after show is always quite good. If you check back about a day later on our YouTube, you'll notice that the YouTube video description has been updated with a bunch of timestamps. And that's thanks to my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this on the replay. Hey, Lori. She's going through and probably at 2x speed watching the replay and putting in all of these timestamps for you. So you can go back years and find information that you may be looking for. All of this is broken down and available on the YouTube video description for each of our live study group sessions. When we're not here on the live stream, we're hanging out in Discord. Come join us. You can find the Discord invite on my site, or simply type into your browser professormesser.com/Discord. Exactly what you were expecting, wasn't it? That Discord link is on my site on the social media icons on the upper right of my site. You can click there. If you don't have a Discord account, make sure you create one. And this Discord account will be one that has complete access to everything that we do on our 24/7 chat. We've also got, eventually, we've got vouchers. The vouchers are there already, but you will eventually need to buy some. And you could, of course, go to the CompTIA website and you could pay full price for your vouchers. But if you're in North America or Canada or a number of U.S. Territories along with the U.S., you get them at a discounted price. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers and you can purchase your vouchers directly on our website. Not only is the voucher discounted, which is already a great bonus, I throw in for free a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook, which can give you a few tips and tricks for getting a couple of extra points perhaps on your exam, maybe even more than that, during your study process, and some tips on how to make more points on the exam when you're in the exam room. The Exam Hacks book is not available for sale. You can only get it if you purchase a voucher, or it comes also included as a free bonus with my success bundles. So this is a great way to not only get a voucher for a discounted price, but also get some extra tips that I've accumulated throughout my career of taking the 25 or 30 different certification exams I've taken on and off throughout the years. That's at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier. The question asked, during startup, a Windows computer shows the message, one or more services failed to start. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this message? Is it an invalid startup device was selected, an invalid VLAN assignment, a bootloader was replaced or changed, incorrect service permissions, or an outdated UEFI BIOS? Let's see how you answered this one. We'll look at the results, and we can see that 46% of you say it's incorrect service permissions. 25% of you say that it is an invalid startup device selected. Then we've got 17% that said the bootloader was replaced or changed, and then single digits for outdated UEFI BIOS or invalid VLAN assignment. This is a question, or this question is asking you about something that occurs once the Windows screen comes up. You've already turned on your system, you've gone through the boot process, and now you get a message on your screen that says something about this one or more services failing to start. And in that particular case, it could be something associated with a driver, bad hardware, or with a service that is trying to run on your system. It even mentions there's a service, it's not starting. Why is it not starting? And that's the real question that has to be solved. And then now we have to go down our troubleshooting steps to determine why this particular service is having a problem. Or in this case, what service is it? We don't even know that yet. This is a bit of a challenge. Now, fortunately, in this question, only one of the answers had anything to do with the Windows operating system once it's started up, because that's where this message appears, is inside of Windows once Windows has started. So this is one where if you're looking at this, if you're someone who answered an invalid startup device was selected, well, if that's the case, it wouldn't have started the operating system at all. So we know it can't be A. An invalid VLAN assignment is a problem communicating across the network. We're having a problem starting a service on our local machine, so our network doesn't appear to be the problem. We've got bootloader replaced or changed. That would certainly affect your ability to start the operating system from the beginning, but the error message that we're seeing is one that is shown once the operating system is already started. Therefore, the bootloader is probably not our issue. And outdated UEFI BIOS, the BIOS configuration or the version of the BIOS that is running, if it was having a problem, probably would not start up your system. So in that particular case, that would not be our issue. That only leaves one option available. That was option D, incorrect service permissions. And if you do have a service that needs some enhanced permissions, then you probably need to add a username and password to the service itself. You have to go into the service to be able to do that once Windows has started. So those of you that are working towards this, in fact, somebody in the chat room has already mentioned it. If you look at the bottom of the screen on my explanation slides, this tells you exactly the section that this comes from. It's from the 220.1102, section 3.1, and that is not only the section for my videos, it's also the section for the exam objectives. I keep those numbers perfectly synchronized. And the video that this is from is the troubleshooting Windows video. So if you did an incorrect service permission, if you selected D, 46% of you did. That is the right answer. You got that one absolutely correct. Well done with all of those. Well, of course, that is something that we looked at last month. We went through the process of understanding more about how to handle troubleshooting service permissions and other things as well. But there's a lot more that we could go through. And in fact, I've created brand new questions for the rest of the study group, starting with one that is not a multiple choice based question. I want to be able to provide you with information about a broader type of question that's used on your exam. And in fact, the first handful of questions you get on the exam will be questions that are not multiple choice questions. They are really dealing with a problem around matching questions, maybe a fill-in-the-blank question. It might be a question where we drag and drop onto a display. Maybe it's a question where we put things in a particular order. The performance-based questions don't ask topics that you don't know about, because all of the topics on the exam come from the exam objectives. It's just a different way to ask you questions about things that you've already learned. So I have for you today a performance-based question, and let's see how you do with this one. The performance-based question asks, put these malware removal best practices in order. And I'm assuming in this case, the order is from the beginning to the end in a timed order. You know, which one do you do first? Which one do you do second? Which one is third? So I have for you these 7 different malware removal steps. And now I want you to rearrange these so that they are in the proper order. For those of you listening on the podcast side, those 7 steps are: educate the end user, disable system restore, schedule scans and run updates, quarantine infected systems, enable system restore, remediate, and identify malware symptoms. Now, if you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. That's the link at the bottom. This is professormesser.com/QA. That link allows you to answer this one. And in this case, all you have to do is put the letters in the proper order. If you think they are already in the proper order, you can simply type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you're done. Now, of course, they're not in that order. You will need to find the proper order for the malware removal best practices as documented in your CompTIA exam objectives. So hopefully that can help you as you're going through this, get a familiarity with this. Some folks in the chat room are saying that earlier question we had about the error message and permissions, that doesn't seem right, but indeed that's exactly the way it works. I in a previous life, worked with an organization where I had to install many Windows services, but the Windows services did not need and could not run as the user writes on that machine. That service could only run as an administrator, or in this case, a domain administrator on that network. And so you had to use a username and password for the service that was enough rights and permissions to be able to perform the functions that service needed to perform. So that's why that particular error I sort of pulled right out of the list of things that I've run into in my career. And whenever that popped up on the screen, I knew that the user had not gone and put in an extra set of permissions with better accounts, with higher permission accounts, so that they could be able to use those. So it becomes really, really useful if you're ever in the place where you're working through those. I think that helps quite a bit. And that's one where you'll start to see these in your careers. You step through these problems and you'll put that one on in the back of your mind and think, if that comes up again, I know exactly where this particular problem happens to be. That's one that instantly, when I see that error, I think immediately, yeah, that's a permissions problem. Somebody did not put in the domain admin or the admin rights or a user with those rights for that service to properly work on that system. That's just, it happens, but that's an easy fix. You simply go into the services, go into the properties of the service and say, instead of using the user's account to run the service, use a different account. Let me put in the username and password for that account. And it works great. Skipping over to domain 3, section 3, we have this question that asks about malware removal. And I'll give you my definition of how this fits into the world of troubleshooting in just a moment. But let's see if we can put together what the proper order is for the malware removal. So let's clear the slate and let's take, of these 7 different options, which are educate the end user, disable system restore, schedule scans and run updates, quarantine infected systems, enable system restore, remediate, and identify malware symptoms, which ones are first, which are second, which are third, and so on. So let's clear it out. Let's start with the one at the top of our list. Before we start the malware removal process, we have to first recognize that we are infected with malware. That perhaps is the easiest of all of these 7 different steps. There's no reason to go through the malware removal process if a system doesn't have malware. So if you're noticing that pop-ups are on the screen, it's running slower than usual, you're seeing strange icons running in the system tray, you're noticing that there's odd applications running on the desktop, that should certainly give you an idea that perhaps something unusual is happening on the system, and that will be our clue to begin the process of removing malware from that particular system. Now, at this point, what I've told you in my videos, and in fact, what is the true best practice in the industry, is to delete everything on the system and install or reinstall from a known good backup or a known good installation media. Maybe re-image the whole system and get it going from there. That's really the only way you can 100% know that you have indeed removed the malware from your system. But this particular set of steps, why, if that's the best practices, why are we having to go through the rest of these steps? Well, that's because sometimes you can't simply delete everything on that system because there might be a data file that has some important information that's not on the backup. Or maybe there's a directory of information someone's been working on for a week, nobody has a backup of it, and we need to recover that data now before we delete everything on the system. And because the malware has corrupted the operating system, it may not even be able to boot properly. So we need to follow a series of steps that would allow us to get into the system, remove enough of the malware to give us access to the file system, and then be able to retrieve that data. That's one of the many reasons you would step through these 7 steps. So the next thing you would do once you identify there's malware is to prevent the system from communicating to anything else on the network. If this malware was smart enough, like many worms are, to hop onto the network, find another system, and infect that system, we need to stop it right now. So we will unplug the network connection, we'll disconnect any external drives, we'll make sure that we don't take those drives anywhere, we'll make sure that nobody else is able to communicate to this system, and this system is not able to communicate to anyone else. It is completely quarantined from the rest of everything. Having that nice air gap on the network will prevent that malware from getting outside of that system. Now we can really start the removal process. And the first thing we may want to do is to disable System Restore. If you've used System Restore, you know it's a fantastic utility for rewinding your computer back to a previous configuration. This can be really helpful if you install a program or you install a driver and suddenly that program or driver is not working properly and you would like to go back to Monday when everything was working fine. You can use System Restore to rewind everything back to Monday. Well, it seems like you would absolutely want to use that for being able to rewind the malware right off of your system. The problem, however, is that the malware knows that the system restore points exist on your system. And not only has it infected your system, it has almost certainly also infected your restore points. So although the restore point would restore the configuration of your system back to a previous config, it would also reinfect your system with malware. That's pointless. So the first thing we do is nuke System Restore. And when you disable System Restore, it deletes all of your previously saved restore points. So there you go. You've now got no restore points to pull from, and therefore you can't accidentally reinfect your machine later. Now that we have that covered, we can go to the next step, which is remediate. That is the process of removing or cleaning the malware that's on your system. Normally, you would do this by using either a malware removal program specific to that malware, or perhaps it's a broader antivirus, anti-malware software that is designed to clean practically anything. So that's a couple of different choices, many different choices you can pull from to remove the malware. That all happens in the remediate step. After you have remediated the malware, what else could we do? Well, we could now schedule some scans and perform updates of the existing antivirus to make sure that once we leave, we know that at least every day, every hour, every week, however we set it up, that it's going to go through the process of really making sure that it scans and continues to be as secure as possible, even once we've left. Once we've cleaned this malware, we can do everything we possibly can to make sure that we can limit any future attempts or infections themselves onto the system. After we have scheduled scans and run updates, we can re-enable System Restore. Of course, we disabled System Restore in that third step, so now it's time to turn it back on again. Obviously, there won't be any System Restore points available, so we can't rewind back to anything, but at least from this point forward, now that we have something available, we can very easily go through the process of re-enabling that, and now we will create new restore points going forward. And then lastly, we need to talk to the end user about how to prevent this from happening, how to recognize when these problems occur, and how to get the problems solved, hopefully before they happen. And this is a very important step in the process. And once we are very clear on what we're dealing with, we've removed it from the system, we've set up some additional scans so that we can keep the system clean, we can talk to the end user about different ways that you might want to go through the process of preventing this. Don't click things that are in your email. Look for things happening on your desktop. At the first instance of that, call the help desk, open a ticket, all of those things. It's never bad to get a ticket from someone who says, I think there might be something bad on my system. Even if it is a false positive, they were at least looking for these things, and they were giving you a heads up that this may be something we should be absolutely aware of. So those are our steps for those of you following along. We want to first identify malware symptoms. Then we want to quarantine the infected system. We want to then disable System Restore. We want to remediate the virus. Afterwards, we want to schedule scans and run updates. We want to enable System Restore again. And then finally, educate the end user. Those are the steps that we are working on. So those are the real important parts of this and why we would go through this process. Folks in the chat room are just there. A lot of people are talking about the process and going through the process and thinking that's a lot of work. Wouldn't you just delete everything and restore from a good backup? As I mentioned originally, yes, you would, but you don't always have that luxury. Occasionally, you will need to recover enough of the system to restore data that you don't have backed up already. And that could save someone a lot of time. So these steps can be very important. Another question, and this is an important one to think about, is this process and understanding the process. You could have gotten some of these in the right place, and some of these could be switched. What if you switch the last two, where instead you educate the end user just before the end, and then the last step would be to enable System Restore? So you got 5 of them right, but the last 2 were wrong. Do you get extra credit or partial credit or some credit for this particular question? CompTIA has documented this and says, well, indeed, this could be an issue. Whenever you start getting into the problems associated with this, it becomes pretty important to know that that is really going to be the most, important part of this process, is going through and understanding from the very beginning to the very end the different things that we should do. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. CompTIA said we sometimes get partial credit, we sometimes don't. So you can't rely on that. And in fact, when you get your results, you don't even know if partial credit has been assigned to it or not. So that's the real key, is you just never know. So do you get partial credit? Perhaps. Will you ever know it? You will not. That's unfortunately the way it works. So hopefully that's something familiar. If you're not familiar with these steps, make sure you have a look at section 3.3 of your exam objectives. I have a whole video on this called Removing Malware, so you can get an idea of how that works. So hopefully this is something you will not have to do a lot, but if you ever run into the situation where you do need to recover a little bit of data from that system, instead of completely deleting everything, you have some steps to go through that can help you retrieve all of that data. Let's now shift gears a little bit and go back to our multiple choice based questions. I have some new questions for you today. Let's start with a question that we have here. And it asks, a macOS administrator would like to protect all data stored on company laptops. Which of the following would provide this data protection? Would it be File Vault, EFS, WPA3, BitLocker, or iCloud? So this is one where you will need to choose from those 5 options. The link you want to use is professormesser.com/QA. So there's where we want to go to the process of locking in our answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We want to go through the process of figuring out what this might be. The question again, a macOS administrator would like to protect all data stored on company laptops. Which of the following would provide this data protection? Is it File Vault, or as we say in the South, File Vault? We got EFS, WPA3, BitLocker, or iCloud. And hopefully one of these should look familiar. All 5 of these should look familiar because they all come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. But hopefully you're able to go through this list and discern which one would apply to this particular situation. This should be the steps you go through. Have a look at that question and see if it's one that looks familiar. Sometimes you can go through the different answers and maybe discard one that you know it possibly could not be. And that's a great situation because now you've got fewer to choose from. I tend to make my live streams a little bit harder than the actual exam because the actual exam will, in most cases, only give you 4 possible choices. And in this case, you can see there are 5 possible choices. So I try to make it a little bit harder. Whether it's harder or not, we'll find out. But this is one where you have to go through all 5 of these to determine which of the following would provide this data protection. Hopefully that can get you familiar with kind of the processes that you'll start to see on an actual CompTIA exam. It's a great way to step through these. Hopefully this is one you know. I saw a lot of people answering it quickly, so maybe we did really, really well with this particular question. We'll have to see if that's the case. Let's see how you did with this one. Again, the question asked, a macOS administrator would like to protect all data stored on company laptops. Which of the following would provide this data protection? Would it be File Vault, EFS, WPA3, BitLocker, or iCloud? And what did you answer? Let's have a look. 55% say it's File Vault. We have 22% say it's iCloud, 14% say it's BitLocker, 6% say EFS, and 3% say WPA3. Only 3%, no, 2% now said WPA3. Not a lot of people jumping on the WPA3 bandwagon. The real key to this question was about the operating system. So unlike a Windows environment or unlike macOS, or unlike Linux, for example, this question asked specifically about macOS. This is someone who's working as an administrator for macOS systems. These laptops are going out the door, and the last thing you want is for those storage drives in those devices to have important company data that is not encrypted. And that's what we mean when we say that data is protected. We have encrypted data on that system. And all of the different options here, File Vault, EFS, WPA3, BitLocker, and in some ways iCloud, are all secure environments. They all deal with encrypted data, but only one of them matches the requirement for being able to encrypt information on the laptop drive of a macOS system. And in that particular case, it would be full disk encryption, FDE, we call it in macOS, and it is a utility called File Vault. It's built into the macOS system. It is something that's free and available free to use if you're running macOS, and it's one that can protect your data because it encrypts everything automatically. If you're already familiar with BitLocker on the Windows side, then this is effectively the same type of functionality, except it's running in the macOS operating system. That's one that requires you to log in. When you log into the operating system with your username and your password, that is the key that unlocks all of the encryption. So if you are trying to get to that drive without performing the proper authentication, none of the data will be available to you. You must know the proper username and password to be able to get into that system and decrypt and use the data that's on that computer. This is a function that's available in your system preferences. Simply look under security and privacy, and you'll see the option there, just like we see it in this tab, for File Vault. And you can simply turn it on and turn it off by clicking the button. That's it. That's very simple and very easy to do. And you can turn it on and turn it off at any time inside of your system preferences. That was the answer we were looking for. 57% of you chose File Vault. That is the answer we were looking for. We could have chosen BitLocker, which 14% of you chose, but obviously BitLocker is a Windows utility. It's not one that runs in macOS, so BitLocker would not be the right answer. Along those same lines, EFS is also a Windows function. That is the encrypting file system that's built into NTFS, and that is a functionality that in this particular case, does not fit the scenario we have. That's something you would find in Windows, and in this case, we're running Mac OS. We did have 21% of you say iCloud. At least that is a Mac OS or at least an Apple-centric technology, but iCloud itself is used to store information securely in a cloud-based environment. If you have a mobile phone, a laptop, you can store files there. You can have backups stored there. Things will happen automatically, but iCloud itself does not protect data stored on a company laptop. It doesn't encrypt anything on a company laptop. It instead can synchronize the data to the cloud, but it doesn't protect the data that's currently on the laptop itself. And as we've already mentioned, WPA3, only 2% of you chose that one. WPA3 is the encryption methodology used, or encryption technology used on wireless networks. If you're communicating over a wireless network, WPA2 or WPA3 would be great to use to protect the data as it's in transit across the network. But that wasn't the situation we had here. We had data stored on a company laptop that's data at rest, and that data is one that would have to be encrypted using a macOS utility. In this case, the only option that makes any sense is option A, File Vault. 57% of you chose the right answer there. Let's do some more. I've got another question available for you. This is a multiple choice based question. This question, speaking of protecting data, we're going to ask a similar question, except we're going to have a little bit of a broader perspective, which asks, which of the following would be the best way to protect data on a USB flash drive? And the way that the different options that you would have available to you are through explicit permissions, BitLocker to go, access control lists, user account control, or single sign-on. Got a few options to choose from. If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to answer using the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no hints in the chat room either. This question again asks, which of the following would be the best way to protect data on a USB flash drive? Would that be explicit permissions, BitLocker to go, access control lists, user account control, and single sign-on? You have a number of options there. Hopefully some of these can help you find what you're looking for. And whenever I start getting into the specifics of these, it really does help if you're able to break down where these particular issues or what these different options might provide you or what they might not provide you. So make sure you step through each one of them. A lot of the questions, especially as you're going through the CompTIA exam, they have a lot of questions like this that ask which one of these would be the best option. And one of the things you'll notice is that to answer the question, you have to read every single answer. You don't get a lot of questions on the CompTIA exams that have a a single question and you immediately know what the answer is and you're looking for the answer in the list. Like, for example, I'll give you one that you'll never find on the CompTIA exam. What port number is used by HTTPS? There you go. And immediately you should know in your mind, oh, it's 443. You simply look for 443 and the answers, click it, and you go to the next thing. They're never going to ask you a question like this. So that's unfortunately the way it turns out is that you will never be able to get a question that is so trivial on an exam. Instead, you'll get a question like this one that really requires you to step through every single one of these answers to determine what the answer is. So, in fact, the chat room was like, oh, it's 443. We already know it. Yep, you're never going to get a question like that on your exam. Instead, you might get a question along the lines of, in which of these cases would be the best situation to use port 443? Then you have to know, oh, what port 443? Oh, it's HTTPS. Okay, in what situation would you use it? One of these. So they really do have you step through a couple of extra steps to be able to answer those. Let's see if you went through the couple of extra steps for this one and see what answer you got. The question asked, which of the following would be the best way to protect data on a USB flash drive? Would that be explicit permissions, BitLocker to go, access control lists, user account control, or single sign-on? And what did you choose? You chose 69% of you say BitLocker to go. 13%, now 14% say explicit permissions. 10% say single sign-on. So 3 of these we at least got some double digits on. It drops off to 5 and 4% for access control lists and user account control. Access control lists. That's easy to say on a live stream. So that's the real key. So I think that if you're someone who was really trying to work through the details of these questions, you would want to kind of break down where people are focusing on for all of these. So having this question really focused on security on these mobile devices. As we've already mentioned, BitLocker is built into Windows, but BitLocker is designed for a drive that is inside your system that is not removable. The vast majority of use cases for BitLocker really take that into account. So your drive is always going to be there. It's not a drive you can unplug. It's something that's inside of your system, and it encrypts everything. But in this question, we were asking for an answer associated with USB drives. A USB drive is more of a problem because a USB drive we can pull out of our system, we can take it with us, and unfortunately, it's so small that it's very easy to lose. So where did I put that USB drive? Now I can't find it. Well, what if somebody else found it? What if you dropped it? Somebody else found the drive, they plugged it into their system, and they can see all of your data. That's something we don't want to happen. So we want to use something that can encrypt USB flash drives, and they have created an extension to BitLocker called, oddly enough, BitLocker to go. I didn't come up with the names, people. They all can't be winners. BitLocker to go encrypts all of the data on these USB drives. You unplug the drive, and all of the data is completely encrypted. Nobody can view it unless they have the correct credentials to be able to view that information. So BitLocker to go is what we were looking for. That is specifically designed to encrypt removable USB drives, and it is a nifty little utility that can really help you. There's all kinds of interesting software packages and hardware distributions. In fact, you could buy a USB flash drive that hardware encrypts the data on the USB flash drive. That is how we get even more security on some of these, so you don't even have to worry about an operating system, BitLocker to go, or anything else. But if you just simply want to take a normal flash drive, encrypt all the data on there, BitLocker to go is a great solution. 65% of you think so as well. You answered B, BitLocker to go. We also have single sign-on, and single sign-on is a great function. It's certainly built into Windows. When you log into Windows with your username and password, you can connect to all of the resources on the network that you have rights to connect to without having to put in your username and password every time. So single sign-on is a great function for that, but it doesn't do anything for protecting data on a USB flash drive. Explicit permissions are permissions that we assign to different objects in the operating system. So we would tell a particular file that's on our system, that file is read-only and only one or two different groups in the company are able to write to that file. So those would be a good example of explicit permissions. But assigning permissions to data does nothing to protect the data itself. It only protects people's access to the data from elsewhere in the operating system. So in this case, a USB flash drive, once you unplug it, having those explicit permissions doesn't help very much. So that's unfortunately not the right answer either. Access control lists are commonly used in operating systems, firewalls, and other types of computing devices to assign and allow different rights and permissions on a big list. Almost like walking up and they say, okay, is your name on the list? Let's see if it is. Yes, it is. You may pass. That's an access control list. That is not going to help you protect data on a USB flash drive because there's no list to choose from once somebody gets their hands on that. And then lastly, a user account control, certainly a Windows function. User account control is designed to protect your system from third-party software accessing parts of the operating system that it should not be. And so it prompts you on the screen, do you really want this application to perform this particular function on your system? This could be dangerous. If so, you need to authenticate properly. That is user account control. In this case, the answer that makes the most sense is answer B, BitLocker to go. We're still fighting in the chat room about if we really like the name or not. We'll have to figure that out later on. Time will tell as we go through this. BitLocker to go, though, is what we call it, and that's what you need to know. It is in the exam objectives. Make sure you're familiar with that technology, and you'll be fine. You'll notice already we've gone through a lot of different topics. We've gone through security and networking, operating systems, and of course the 1102 exam along with the 1101 are extensive in the number of topics you need to know. I made the video course myself, and it's 137 videos long, 19 hours of content. And you know, my content I make efficient. It is pared down to only give you the information you need to pass the exam. And it does it in a way that gives you exactly what you're looking for, and then we're off to the next topic. So even 19 hours, although it seems like a long time, I could have done another 19 hours on this course. You're welcome that I did not. And my course, of course, covers every single topic from the exam objectives, everything from networking to security to mobile devices to hardware to operating systems. It's all in these videos, but not everybody has a chance to go through all of the videos. So one of the things I highly recommend is you take some notes. But of course, if you don't have time to watch every video, you may not have time to take notes either. So I've taken some for you. I have the course notes. They're available on my website. These course notes are available in a PDF form, like you see here. There's also a physical form. Look, they're identical to the digital form, but I print them out for you on a nice color, perfect bound, they call it, paperback book. And you've got now all of the information available. And if you get the physical version, you get the digital thrown in there for free. So you get both of those available. These course notes, let's just go through a few pages of them here. Just for Core 2, they are like 56 or 57 pages long because I put everything in here. Everything that is in this list is available. You've got all the text from the videos. You've got the important graphics from the videos. And if there are any tables associated with the content in the videos, I put the tables in here too. So you never have to go looking at your list wondering, did I copy that properly? It's already in my set of course notes. They are all there. And if you're someone who's really looking for a way to have everything consolidated into one view, you've already gone through your book, you've already watched the videos, maybe you have some hands-on and you're doing that final push for your studies, this might help you as well. Have a look at those. You'll find them on my website at professormesser.com/1102notes. And you, of course, have the option for both the digital and the physical edition of the notes. If you already have the digital edition and you're thinking, maybe I should have gotten the physical version, let me know and I can give you an upgrade coupon where you could pay the difference and get the physical edition along with that. So there's always an option for upgrading on my site, something that might be useful whenever you're working through those. Those are the course notes, and it's another great way to support what we do here at the Professor Messer website. So thanks so much for your ongoing support. Let's go back to more questions. I want to try to fit in some more before we run out of time. This next question asks, a Windows system shows the message, USB controller resources exceeded. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would we reboot the system, install the latest Windows updates, delete any duplicate files, or move a USB device to a different interface? A Windows system shows the message USB controller resources exceeded. Which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be reboot the system, install the latest Windows updates, delete any duplicate files, or move the USB device to a different interface? There it is. So if you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Yes, it's a rare 4-answer question. You don't get those very much on the study group, so enjoy that. It's one that makes it a little bit easier if you're guessing. You got a 25% chance now instead of 20%. So that's those 5%, those can be big. Let's see how well you do between all of these. This is a question about a topic that is specifically mentioned in the Core 2 exam. So that's another great place to go, is to the exam objectives. It can tell you a lot about what you might need to know about these particular topics. So hopefully that can help you. As always, of course, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll be able to figure out what the answer might be for these. So folks in the chat room asking where you can get discounts for both A+ exams. Well, I'm glad you asked. You can visit the Professor Messer website at www.professormesser.com/vouchers. We have discounted vouchers on our site. So we mentioned that earlier. It'd be a good way to get a discount if you happen to be in the US or Canada. It's a great way to get a discount on your exams. Also have links there to the student discounts too, because if you're in college, there's a student discount available that's even better than the ones you get from CompTIA or from my site. I've also got a link on the same page. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. There's a link at the top of the page that says, don't waste your time with this. Go over to the student side and you can get even a better breakdown. So let's see how we do with this question. A number of you have locked in your answers already. Let's see how you did with this question. It asked, a Windows system shows the message USB controller resources exceeded. I don't even know what that means. It says, which of the following would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be reboot the system, install the latest Windows updates, delete any duplicate files, or move a USB device to a different interface? So which one did you choose? Let's look at the results. Out of these 4 answers, 65% of you say move the USB device to a different interface. 16% say delete any duplicate files. We also have 9% each that said reboot the system or install the latest Windows updates. So we're sort of mixed as to what this can be, although we did get a clear majority at 65% that said you simply move a USB device to a different interface. But is that really going to help you with this particular problem? Well, the problem itself is a very specific kind of issue. And that specific kind of issue is one that is a USB controller resource warning. This is one that is really wrapped around the hardware of your system. Inside of each USB controller on your system, there are a series of buffers. The actual term for them is endpoints. And depending on the USB controller that you have, there are a different number of buffers available. And as you plug in USB devices, you start using up those buffers. Different USB devices can use more or fewer buffers depending on the device. If it's an audio controller, it might use a lot of buffers. If it's a simple USB flash drive, it might only use a few of those buffers. But you can eventually exceed the number that is available. And you'll get a message like this one that says the controller does not have enough resources for this device. Now, fortunately, on the screen itself, it even tells you, try connecting your device to a different port on your PC or disconnect the device you're not using. That will obviously, if you move to a different USB interface, we're hoping that that different interface is connected to a different USB controller, because often there are multiple USB controllers on your system. And if it's a different controller, you might have more of those endpoints available, more of that buffer available, and it won't give you that message. But we've also got a situation where we might want to unplug something we're not using. That would also free up some of those buffers. So those are a great place to go if you're trying to resolve problems on your system, because those buffers, those resources that are available are very limited. So you've got a few extra options here. Maybe you should just move the device to another one, or maybe you can match the device to the type of USB interface that you're using. If it's a USB 3 device, plug it into a USB 3 interface, or vice versa. If it's USB 2, plug it into a USB 2 interface. So a number of different ways you could go with this one, but only one of these answers was available to you, and that indeed was answer D, move a USB device to a different interface. 64% of you chose that. You're absolutely correct. Deleting duplicate files. I don't even know what files we would be referring to here. Maybe if it's a USB drive, maybe there are there are files on the USB drive. Maybe we're deleting files on our system board and on our system controller or our system storage. Well, in any case, neither of those will help you create more endpoints on your USB, because those endpoints are built into the hardware of your USB controller. So deleting files, moving files around, doing other things, not going to help you. Installing the latest Windows updates, that because this particular series of resources is available in hardware, you can install some new software, but that doesn't change the capabilities of your hardware. That would be great if we could just simply run some new software and I've got a new video controller. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. We would need to replace hardware to make that happen. So updating Windows files, updating the operating system, running the monthly updates are not going to increase the number of endpoints available in USB. And then lastly, the question that I frankly thought more people would choose would be reboot the system, because that is kind of our standard response to anything is, have you rebooted the system? Well, because this problem is related to resources available in the hardware of your system, and it's based on what you currently have plugged into your USB interfaces, rebooting the system doesn't change anything. You've still got the same number of devices plugged into your USB interfaces. You've still got exactly the same USB controllers in your system with exactly the same number of endpoints available. Therefore, rebooting your system does absolutely zero to help this particular problem of USB controller resources exceeded. So the answer here, the only one that makes any sense, the only one that's really going to help you is answer D, move a USB device to a different interface, and 64% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for Continuing Education Unit Credit, or CEUs, this first means that you've passed your A+ Network Plus Security Plus exam or something similar, and you are trying to renew that certification. If you are, or maybe you might be using these CEUs to renew a different certification as well. People use them for different reasons. So if you do need a webinar category CEU for watching this 1-hour event, then you want to follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a link that says Contact Us. When you click that link, a form will show up, and in that form, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, please put May 2023 Core 2 so that I know where this came from. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself at the very top, please put the super secret code word of the month, USB controller. USB controller is the super secret code words of the month, I guess. A couple of words. So put those in the message. If you'd like to put anything else, you're welcome to do that. I read through every single one of these and submit that, and I will be glad to send you an email certifying that you were here for 1 hour of a webinar category CEU for this event. It doesn't matter if you got the questions right. It doesn't matter if you got the questions wrong. You simply send that message, and I will send you back an email that has been digitally signed by me, so you know it really came from me, and now nobody can change that now that I've sent it, which is, of course, the real benefit to having that there. So that is our process. Make sure you follow that process. Again, the top or bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put May 2023 Core 2, and in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, USB controller. And we'll have a good way to make sure that you are able to wait on me now, because now I have to go through the process of going through all of these and sending you back those emails. So it usually takes about a week or so, sometimes faster. Maybe I can get them done today. I don't know. So get those in as quickly as you can so that you're assured you're going to be getting one of those back. Let's do some more questions. We've got more on the questions. This next question is a multiple choice question that asks, which of the following would provide data integrity for a drive image taken after a security incident? Would it be securely delete the original drive? Would it be to store the original drive and the drive image in different locations? Would it be to take a picture of the breached system's display? Would it be to hash the drive image file? Or would it be to create a new working drive from the image? I'm trying to get everything on the screen so we can make sure you see that. The question again asked, which of the following would provide data integrity for a drive image taken after a security incident? Is it securely delete the original drive, store the original drive and the drive image in different locations, take a picture of the breached system's display, hash the drive image file, or create a new working drive from the image? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Some folks in the chat room are asking about the CEUs and the subject line. I say in the subject line, put May 2023 Core 2, but you could put anything that kind of associates this. And quite honestly, if I see the line, the words in the body of the message, most of the time I can figure it out if it's something that's happened recently. If it hasn't happened recently, it's a little more difficult for me to cross-reference. So just something there so I know at least what type of video this came from, so that I can cross-reference it and make sure that I'm giving you the CEU for something you were requesting. That's because occasionally, this does happen, I will use super secret code words that are duplicated from a year and a half ago because I don't remember what I did a year and a half ago. And so someone will submit that CEU with that word, and I'll think, do they mean the one from last month or do they mean the one from a year and a half ago? So that's just my way to sync those up in my chaotic world. And as long as I can figure it out, we're in good shape. Otherwise, I'll just guess and I'll send you one back. And I don't know if that's really what you need either. It's probably not the best to have that there. Oh, sure. You can submit CEUs from, well, way back, as long as you'd like. So that's another great way to do that. Hopefully that's one as you're stepping through all of these. It can be really simple to send those in. So I think that would be a good one. Let's see. What else we may be doing here. Let's see if we can and we have a number of you putting in your answers. Notice the numbers are not incrementing as fast as I normally expect. So if I know you know the answer, those tend to go a little bit faster, but maybe you take your time on this one and maybe you're even more correct. So maybe I'm wrong in my assumption. Let's find out. The question again asked, which of the following would provide data integrity for a drive image taken after a security incident? Is it securely delete the original drive, store the original drive and the drive image in different locations, take a picture of the breached system's display, hash the drive image file, or create a new working drive from the image? Let's show the results, and we can see 53%, so just over half, say that the answer is hash the drive image file. But nearly a quarter of you say you store the original drive in one place and you store the drive image in a completely different place. That's the best way to provide data integrity. And then we have 17% that say create a new working drive from the image. Lastly, 7% say to securely delete the original drive, and 1% say to take a picture of the breached system's display. Well, if we go with the majority here, 51% is indeed a majority, then we would say to hash the drive image file. This is really related to grabbing the data and being able to effectively freeze it so that that data that we have acquired will never change throughout the entire process of discovering what happened on that system. That is effectively the definition of data integrity, where if you collect some data, you have some data that you can really assure that that data never changes as from day to day, from week to week, from month to month. You could look at that data a year later and you know the data has not changed because you've implemented some type of data integrity. So let's step through this process. If we were an attacker and we wanted to hide information that may have been collected, we want to somehow get around these data integrity features. Let's see if we're able to do that. So first, we're going to start with the very common process. Whenever there is an incident and you have some data on a drive, let's collect that data. And there's lots of great utilities to do that. If you've ever seen any type of utility that does a backup of data sector by sector, these are great tools to use to image the systems that are there. And I think if you ever get into a scenario where you're really working through finding data and collecting it, this is the first thing you do when you're collecting data from a drive, is you copy everything that's on the drive, because the drive might fail. You might have that drive and it works fine today, but when you come back and turn on the system, suddenly the drive doesn't work anymore. So while the drive is here, while it's available to you, while it is active and while it is accessible, we need to perform an image. There's lots of utilities you can use to do that on a sector by sector, a bit by bit basis on that drive. So now we've effectively created a complete duplicate of that drive. And we have it in a file, we have it on another storage medium, maybe we make some backups of it, and we've got it. At that point, we might want to go through the process of analyzing or looking at the drive and what happens to be there. But how do we know that the data we collected a year ago on this drive is the same data that we're looking at today? One of the most common ways is you would create a hash of that drive a year ago. And a year later, you can perform the same hash on that data. And if those two hashes match, then nothing has changed with that drive. It's a relatively simple process. It's a way to use cryptography in a way to confirm that the integrity of this data is still valid. And so it's very, very useful to be able to do that. I don't necessarily agree that we're adding more strength to the data, because we're not really adding any strength, not adding anything to the data. We're simply taking a fingerprint. It's sort of like the fingerprint that you have on your fingers, where we're able to put that fingerprint down. And if you looked at my fingerprint a year from now, it's the same thing. So that's the process we're going through to have that there. Doesn't change the data, doesn't make the data more powerful, doesn't make the data safer. In fact, someone can still go into the drive and change the data. The real difference is, can I confirm that the data has been changed or not? And we do that with those hashes and being able to have that. Some folks in the chat were saying, well, how do you save that hash calculation? Lots of ways to do it. You can write it down. You can store it on a separate medium. You can take a picture of the hash. You can send the hash to somebody in an email. There's lots of ways to take that hash data so that you have it there. The real key for this is that you take the hash. If you don't take the hash and create a hash at the very beginning, there's no way to check the integrity of the data later. So that's a really important part of this. That is what we were hoping to find, is the only way to confirm integrity is if we're able to somehow do a huge comparison. Otherwise, you would have to go through the drive bit by bit and compare it to the old one. That would take you forever. It would take you years to go through a drive and be able to do that. The hash is something that happens very, very quickly. Hashing the drive image file is one of the best ways to do that. Indeed, 52% of you were spot on with hashing the drive image file. Now, 24% of you said, we're going to store the original drive in one place, and we're going to be sneaky. We're going to take the image of our drive and store it in a different place. Okay, so I'm assuming you're going to be working from that image. What if somebody goes in and changes the image? Would you know? You would not. You didn't take a hash. What if somebody goes in and changes the original drive? So you're working on the image and you found some incriminating data. And during the trial, they say, well, let's look at the original drive where this data happens to be. And you look at the drive and the data's not there because somebody has changed the original drive. But you have no way to confirm that someone changed the original drive because you didn't take a hash. That's the real problem. That's what we're trying to resolve and get around, is somebody modifying some of that data, either on the original drive or the image that you took. You have to have something there to be able to work from. The next one on our list is 15% that said create a new working drive from the image, which you may end up having to do. You may have to create an image and then from the image create a drive again for a number of different technical reasons, but none of those are providing any integrity. Once we create the new working drive, how do we know that it has exactly the same information as the original drive? You don't, and there's no way to know. So that's a real problem for people working in data. You have to be able to maintain the integrity of that, and creating a new working drive doesn't provide any additional integrity. 7% of you say securely delete the original drive. Probably not a good idea either. You don't want to delete anything on that original drive. That'd be like deleting the evidence. That's a bad idea. Never delete anything when you're working in an environment like this. And deleting the data indeed provides the opposite of data integrity. It creates a situation where there is no data integrity if you delete the original drive. And then lastly, we've got 2% of you that say take a picture of the breached system's display. In fact, I mentioned in my course, this is a very common way to capture what's on the screen, because when you first get into these systems, you'll sit down in front of a breached system and there may be information on the screen that's very valuable, but in the instant you start touching the keyboard or modifying anything with that system, you might lose all of that information that was on the screen. So grabbing your phone, taking a quick snapshot, can confirm that you've at least captured everything that was on the screen when you first arrived at that system. But it doesn't provide any integrity. And that's what our question was about, was having data integrity for a drive image. So only one answer really provided integrity. It was indeed answer D, hash the drive image file. That's the one we were searching for. That's the one we were looking for to determine where we can work with integrity on this system. And that's the one you should have chosen as well. Hopefully that's the one you came up with. Answer D, hash the drive image file. I know that we're sort of in overtime here. We're after the first of the hour, but I do have one more question for you. So this question, though, is not one that I wrote just for the study group. It's one that I wrote so that you would be more prepared for your exams. These study groups are there just to update you, or at least get you familiar with some of the terms or topics that come from my videos. But ultimately, you're going to need to study for your exams. And one of the things that I found that is an enormous problem on the internet is there's some really bad questions out there. You'll run into question banks that ask questions from versions of exams that are 2 versions ago. The answers don't seem to have anything to do with the questions themselves. And then the answers don't tell you anything about why an answer was right or why an answer was wrong. And after seeing this, I thought there's a better way to do these questions. How can we create a series of questions that are designed with the same style, the same feel, the same voice as the actual exam questions, and are written by somebody who really understands the technology and gives you common sense questions, common sense answers, and they all make sense whenever you put them all together. And the way that I've done this is through my practice exams book. This is a 380 question book just for Core 2. Has 3 separate 90 question exams on it. They have questions. 5 of the questions in each exam are performance-based questions, different types of performance-based questions. And there's a lot that's in this book. Let me give you just an overview of this. I have a question that's here from the book. It's here in my PDF reader. And the question here asks, again, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We're gonna try to do this ourselves. Just lock away your answer in your brain. The question asks, a user is connecting their laptop to an external monitor and keyboard, but the laptop goes into sleep mode if the laptop screen is shut. Which of the following would modify this configuration to keep the laptop running when the lid is closed? And we have a number of options to choose from. The first option is power options. Then we have device manager, or is it personalization, or it could be user accounts. Now, as we go through these and try to determine what these are, you should be able to lock these down. Now, because this is a PDF, I can go into my annotation tools on the PDF and I can break down this. If I think the answer is C, I can select that option, or maybe I want to highlight part of the question so that I can really understand what's happening there. This is really a useful thing to have available. Whoop, there we go, is these questions that are here. But notice that I've also set these questions up where I could, if I just want to know if it's A, B, C, or D, I could go over to page 33 and have a look at that, because I'm on page 30 right now. There's page 29. Now I'm on page 30. We could also fast forward up to page 123, where I go through a large explanation of the details of this question. Now, of course, this is a book, and if you have the physical book, like I have here, you simply flip over to page 123 and you look at the answer, and then you can easily flip back. Now, because this is a PDF, I do that more electronically. I've created links for you. All you have to do is click on the thing that says the details, and it will fast forward to page 100 and whatever this was, 123, and give you the question again. And then it tells you the answer is A, power options, and it tells you what all of the explanation of why that is the right answer. Now, of course, if you get the answer right, giving you an explanation of why the answer is right is sort of pointless. You already knew why the answer was right, I guess, unless you guessed. Maybe it helps you in those rare occasions where you just happen to select the right one. But most of the time, an explanation of the right answer doesn't help us. The only time we learn anything is when we get the question wrong. So hopefully, I don't mean this in the wrong way, but you understand what I'm saying. Hopefully you get some questions wrong. And when that happens, you can look at the incorrect answers. And for every incorrect answer in my book, I explain to you why it's incorrect. So that if you do get it wrong, you can, of course, see why you got it wrong. And now you've learned something that you can apply to other questions as you go along. It is kind of this circular process where we're looking at a question and we're looking at the answers. In fact, I highly recommend, if you have my book and you get the question right, don't just skip to the next question. Read through the incorrect answers as well, because you might see something in the incorrect answers that you didn't know about, but could in fact show up on your exam. So that's another important thing to do. And then lastly, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we have a link to the video that was used to create the question to begin with. So if you don't even understand the question, I've been there. I have at least a way that you could go back and see, why did this question appear? How did this question appear? And in what particular exam objective is associated with this question? You'll find that at the bottom of every question. And of course, this is just a multiple choice based question, but I've also got performance based questions in these books as well. And now once you're done with this, I can click the back button in my PDF reader and I'm back to where I started, and I can go to the next question that's in the book. So this makes it very easy to be able to step through. Some people will have a separate notepad up on their screen and they'll document their answers in there. Some people will write in the PDF itself. The PDF is one that allows you to annotate and write in there without any problem whatsoever. So it's another great way to also support what we do here. And if you buy this along with my course notes, there's also a little bit of a discount associated with it, so you can save a few bucks there too. Find out more about my practice exams at professormesser.com/core2pe. Well, this was a lot in one single hour, but everything we talked about is listed in the exam objectives. The CompTIA exam objectives are a valuable tool. This is a set of the exam objectives here. They tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. Quite literally, if you know every bullet that is in this set of exam objectives, you will pass your exam. There's no question that everything that's in here lists out details of everything you need to know. Take, for example, this section 1.10, identify common features and tools of the macOS/desktop OS. I need to install installation and uninstallation of applications of file types DMG, PKG, APP. I need to understand the App Store, and I need to understand the uninstallation process. I also need to understand Apple ID and corporate restrictions. I also need to understand backups, antivirus, updates/patches, displays, networks, printers, scanners, privacy, accessibility, time machine, multiple desktops, mission control, et cetera, et cetera. Look at all these bullets. It is extensive. And by the way, all of this is available for you to download for free. So make sure you get your copy of these. It should be the first thing you download and read through before you start your studies. This should be the last thing you read through before you go into the exam, just to confirm that you've really understood everything that could be asked of you. And you can get your free copy of this on the CompTIA website. There's also a link to that at professormesser.com/objectives, or simply use your favorite search engine and search for CompTIA Exam Objectives. That will help you as well. I do one of these study groups for each of my courses every month. So this week was our Core 1 and Core 2. Next week we have Network Plus. The week after that we have Security Plus. We've got a little bit going on. And you'll find them also, we've got them scheduled for June already. June the 6th and 8th is for A+, the 14th for Network Plus, and the 21st for Security Plus. These times and dates can sometimes change, however. So make sure you have a look at professormesser.com/calendar. I also have an events calendar on my Discord. Both of those are always updated. So make sure you have a look at those, and you'll be able to find exactly when our next live event is going to be. Although the process of me asking you the questions is over, we're still going through a lot of questions. We have a lot to go through. And so stick around for our after show. We'll start with the question that was asked originally before we got started about when you walk into your exam, how do you keep everything at an even keel? How do you deal with anxiety when you walk into these exams? I have some tips for you coming up in just a moment. Stick around for that. Don't forget about my course notes and practice exams on my website. Go to professormesser.com/1102success. We've also got my discounted vouchers on my site along with my free exam hacks ebook. If you buy one of those vouchers, it's at professormesser.com/vouchers. And don't forget about following us. And if you like this video, I would love it and appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. It really does help a lot when I'm talking with my representatives over on YouTube. They can see which things you like to see. They can give us more feedback about things that can help us with the channel. They've been an extreme help to us. So I'd like to let them know that you like this content as well. And the only way to do that is if you give it a thumbs up, and maybe if you're feeling especially nice, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would be a huge help as well. Well, stick around. We've got more coming. We've got a lot more because I'm sure you have plenty of questions. Stick around for the after show. We'll see you on the other side of this. And thank you for also being here. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let's take a sip. And let's bring up the camera and let's click a thing. There we go. It's time for the after show, everybody. In the after show, there really is no script. I don't have any slides. There's nothing set up. This is really more of an opportunity where instead of me asking the questions of you, this is a chance for you to ask the questions of me. There's a couple of different ways to do this, but I am watching the chat on YouTube. That chat is the one that I've been referencing this whole time. So I can see the messages that you're putting into the chat. I also have a chat that's on my website at professormesser.com/live. If you're on that page, it's the same chat. I just embedded the YouTube chat onto my website. So you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay on that page. If you see a chat, that's the one I'm looking at. It's the one on YouTube. So before I get into the question about anxiety on the exam, there was a question from Matthew in the chat room that says, hey, I bought the PDF version. Can I get a signed physical copy for a prorated fee? Well, I can give you almost that. I can give you a physical copy for a prorated fee. But as the internet works, I don't have a stack of books behind me. In fact, there aren't any here in the studio. I partner with a third party that creates these books on demand. So when you purchase a book from me, I tell them, send that person a book. And it leaves out of the many different printing houses we have around the world. So if you're in Australia, it's local to Australia. If you're in Europe, there are local printers in Europe. If you're in the US and Canada, it's usually printed somewhere out of the US. So unfortunately, I don't have any I can sign. They are magically sent out to you without my physical touching of them. So unfortunately, I do not have a signed physical copy available to you, but I do prorate them. So if you're someone who has bought the PDF version and you're thinking, I would love the physical edition, I can provide you with links and instructions for upgrading to that physical edition without having to repurchase the digital version. So it's a simple upgrade fee for the difference in cost between those, which that makes sense whenever you're trying to work through those. There was a question earlier, really before we got started today, about anxiety in an exam. And this is interestingly enough, a relatively popular question. And I think it's because sort of overall as humans, we tend to get kind of excited about exams. We get concerned and nervous when it's time to go in an exam. It's an unknown situation. And as humans, we effectively have a fear of the unknown. And it's interesting that fear of the unknown it's sort of an ongoing theme in IT. It's one of these things that we do all the time is fear of the unknown. In fact, most of what you will find in technology is unknown. You will be walking into situations all the time as a technologist where people are asking you questions. They're expecting you to be knowledgeable. They're looking for some advice, but they're asking you about things you've never used before. So how do you deal with these very stressful situations where people want you to know something, but you may not know? In fact, you don't know if you know because you haven't been asked the question yet in your exam. Now, fortunately, there are a number of different tasks that I go through prior to taking an exam. Some of them are a little extreme, but I only mention them because a number of you are also in this case where the anxiety on exam is a little bit more than most people. Maybe you feel like walking into the exam, you're a lot more nervous than what other people tell you should be. And if that's your case, I have some tips for you. So the first thing that I do is I become very familiar with the exam center. For me, some of the stress of the exam is getting there. Now, this, of course, only applies if you're someone who is going to take the exam at a testing center. You're not taking the exam at home, which, by the way, has its own set of anxiety-ridden situations associated with it we'll talk about in just a moment. But let's say you're taking the exam in a testing center. I like to be familiar with the path, how I get there. Am I driving there? Am I taking an Uber? Am I taking the bus? Am I having someone else take me? I like to know how to get there. And I like to know once I get there that there's plenty of parking. Where am I going to put the car? Do I need to get there 10 minutes early because I have to park across the street or at a parking garage? You don't know sometimes until you get there. I will often do some recon prior to my test date, hopefully more than a day before. But if you're in the area and you're driving around, you may want to swing by and say, let's see where that building happens to be. Let's go see what's going on there. Oh, there's plenty of parking here. It's in a nice parking lot. They have their own building, or maybe they're in a strip mall. Maybe they've got a separate office building. It's in the middle of a city. So I will need to find parking nearby. Oh, look, there's a parking garage. I wonder if that parking garage is usually busy during the day. Let's go in and see. What's it going to cost you? Might be free for the first 15 minutes, or it might be $1 to park for 15 minutes. Let's go in the parking garage. Let's go up. Oh, there's plenty of parking here. This is a great place to park. Now I know where I'm going to take my exam. I know how to get here. I know there's not going to be a problem with parking. First stressful thing off my list. No problem. So checking out the testing center is always a good idea. If they allow you to go in and see the testing center, that's even better. So you can really tell that, oh, okay, they have new monitors. They have systems inside. It's a nice, clean environment. It's comfortable. The air conditioning works. That's always good. Now, on the test day itself, I tend to get there early. And sometimes when I get there early, maybe I get there 15 minutes early or 30 minutes early, sometimes they'll say, well, we're ready to go. We got an opening if you want to go right in. And sometimes I have, depending on how I felt, yeah, let's go right in. Let's start early. I'll start 30 minutes early. But sometimes I'll say, no, tell you what, I'm going to sit here for a little bit. And I'll flip through my notes, read through my book, sort of, oh, I'm off the road. I've stopped driving. Let's now calm it down a little bit. And I'll take about 10 to 15 minutes to hang out in the waiting room, go over some things, check my emails, and just sort of relax into the environment. And I think that's sometimes useful too. Once I get into the exam room and they click the start button, You would think that would be very stressful to jump into the exam. And for me, it certainly is. This is me on my first question of the exam. I'm gonna pull up the question we just went through in my practice exams. Okay, we get to the first question on our exam. They hit go. Okay, here's the first question. A user is connecting their laptop to an external monitor and keyboard. The laptop goes into sleep mode if the laptop screen is shut. Which of the following would modify this configuration to keep the laptop running when the lid is closed? So power options display. What was the question again? Okay, well, let me read again. Hold on. A user is connecting their laptop to an external monitor and keyboard, but the laptop goes into sleep mode if the laptop screen is shut. Is this in English? I'm not here. I'm reading it and I recognize the words, but it's not registering in my brain. So I'm in such a nervous state that I now can't read. That's the problem. When you get to that point where English is my first language and yet I can't read it, that's a problem when you're on an exam. The clock is ticking and now I can't read anything. So here's my tip for this one. When you first sit down in front of the exam, they don't start it up right away. The first thing that happens is that it requires you to read through and approve something called the candidate agreement. This is the contract between you and CompTIA that says you will not repeat any of this information. You're not using anything to cheat on this exam. You're not taking something into the exam room that is not appropriate. It's the rules and regulations that you are referring to. So most of us do this. We click the top, we go whoop, scroll the bottom, and we click approve, like we were installing software and not reading through the end user license agreement. Scroll, go. Let's start the exam. What you may not realize is they give you about 15 to 20 minutes to read that and to finally click the go button. And I would highly recommend that you read it or not, but you sit there for 15 to 20 minutes until the adrenaline wears off, until you're okay. I think, in fact, maybe reading the document, you can start reading at the top. And then as you get into it, you're actually reading it and going, well, that's interesting. Finally, you're recognizing words again. Finally, your brain is able to synchronize what you see on a screen with things that you can think about in your head. So this would be a time, okay, now I'm really looking through and understanding what's in front of me. And it really just gives your body time to work the adrenaline out of your blood system. Now you're settled down, you're sitting in a chair. You can see there's other people in the room. How you doing? How's it going? You can't talk to them actually, but how's it going? You do that. Hey, let them know, good luck. Hopefully it goes well for you. Give them a little head nod. And then now you're fine. Now things have settled down a little bit. The stress level's gone down. You know how to use the mouse now. You're comfortable with the screen. You can kind of get comfortable in your chair. Temperature's good. And now we're going to say, yes, I agree to the terms of the candidate agreement. And yes, I'm ready to start the exam. So it's interesting how just a few minutes, spending some time at the beginning, relaxing, looking at the data on the screen can settle you down enough so when that first question hits, you now can read the entire question and understand exactly what's in the question. This is probably something I really did not get. I didn't understand really what was happening until my third or fourth exam, because every exam I would take, I wasn't reading the first 2 or 3 questions. It took me a while to settle in. And then on some exams, you can go back and look at those questions again. On Cisco exams, you can't, which makes it even worse. What if you didn't read the questions? You don't know, let me just pick one and go to the next. But then you realize, well, wait, I can't go back. Once you answer, you're done. Some other folks in the chat room were saying that that the data centers or the testing centers will sometimes give you ear protection. They'll either give you something you put in your ear to let all the noise that's in the room go away. Sometimes they have headphones, but that is one where that may help you too, especially if you're hearing things and you can hear people out in the hallway and they're having a class in the other room. You just put those in your ear and everything disappears. That may be another useful thing to have with you. And if they don't provide you with hearing protection. Maybe bring some foam plugs with you. Just check them at the front desk and say, I'd like to use these foam plugs. Is that okay? And they go, oh, we have some for you, or yes, you can use those. And that's what you can do. So that works out very well too. Now, if you're taking your exam at home, it's a little bit different. At home, you have to take care of all of the room yourself. You have to make sure the desk is clean. You have to really break it down. Obviously, I would not be able to take the test here. They would see this and say, hold on, you can't take a test here. You can have one monitor when you're taking the exam. So all of these screens have to be not only powered down, they have to be unplugged, and you have to take pictures and send them pictures of them all unplugged. So obviously, I would never take an exam in here. Then you have to also worry that somebody's going to walk in the room. If somebody walks into the room, into the camera view, they will tell you that your test is over. That's it. You've now, hopefully you answered enough questions to pass, because now the test is over. If they hear noises, the test is over. If you look up, let me think about that. Well, test is over. What are you looking at? You're looking at something. You have to look at the screen the whole time. If you put your hand right here in front of your mouth, your test is over, potentially. Most of the time, they're going to give you a warning. Like, move your hand from in front of your face. It'll pop up in a chat. Move your hand from in front of your, oh, sorry. That's it. And so if you do it again, your exam will be over. So you can't talk in the exam. You can't do this. You can't do, a user is connecting their laptop to an external monitor and keyboard with the laptop. Nope, can't do that. If you do that, your exam's over. So there's certain rules that are also, you can't do those at the exam center either. But because the proctor is in the other room and they're not quite as particular with those rules as they are online, you tend to get away with a little bit more at a testing center. It's not supposed to be that way, but functionally, that's the way it turns out. So they're a little bit less strict. Now, some people will tell you, I took my exam at home. I didn't have to deal with any of that. Nobody said anything about it, and I was fine. Well, good for them. But there are not just a few stories. There are many, 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 many stories like this on the CompTIA subreddit and elsewhere, where people have documented situations where they're sitting at their desk, their roommate accidentally walked into the room, said, oh, sorry, closed the door, and they walked out. Test was over. Failed them. Boom, done. They were on question number 2. Done. And they had to pay to take the exam again because they knew the rules, they didn't lock the door, and they broke the rules. So were they cheating? Probably not. They just walked into the room accidentally. But did it break the rules? Yes, it did. And it's difficult to fight on that one when they can clearly have the video of the person walking in, and here's the rule that says nobody can interrupt. Okay, well, there's nothing you can do. So hopefully, if you're taking the exam at home, you already know about these things. I'm giving you the heads up. This will automatically make the situation less stressful. There'll be less anxiety at home because you're ready for those particular situations. You know not to put the hand in front of the mouth. You know not to say anything on your exam. Therefore, it will be a lot easier for you. You just have to be prepared for those types of situations so they don't throw you. Some people have even said in the middle of the exam, it popped up this chat saying, don't talk. But I don't recall talking. And it sort of threw them, like, did I talk and I don't remember talking? Were they hearing me talk? Were they hearing someone else talk and they think it's me? So it really threw them off for a number of questions on the exam. Just know that it happens. And if that pops up, just got it. Just sort of put it aside. You already know that was possibility. And now it's not going to stress you out that much. So that's what I would recommend, is sort of follow some of those steps. And I think that your exam experience will be as good as it could possibly be, especially if you can kind of let a lot of that stress work its way out and then finally jump into the exam. I think that's a good way to do it too. Hopefully that will help you as you step through those. Maybe you've got some other ideas about how you can help with some of the stress of these exams. Exams are stressful. You can't get rid of all the stress, but try to find a good way to work around those problems and be able to work through them. Can you take bathroom breaks? Not at home. Once you start the exam, you can't leave. You are in front of the camera. It is recording you. You cannot leave. If you leave, the exam is over. That's it. Really, it should be that way at testing centers too. And the clock does not stop when you walk out of the room. So at a testing center, there have been times at a testing center where people have left, they've gone to the restroom and come in because the testing center knows that they don't have anything in the restroom. It is a controlled environment, but they do not stop the clock. The clock still goes. So it doesn't help you very much when you're working through those. Hopefully that can help you with those too. It's only 90 minutes. So I think you'll do okay in that. That should be pretty good. Let's go through some other questions that have come in. We'll have a look at Art. That's an interesting last name. Art's last name is Enthusiast. That's an interesting last name, Art. Arthur writes, when going for cybersec internship, how can I prep for it? Show I'm a good candidate, despite not having any certs yet and very little experience all around. This probably describes every single internship ever, which is you're walking in, you're not supposed to know anything. You're an intern. You're the person we're putting into this place to see how well they can learn this content and see if it's something that might interest them as a career. So first, they're not expecting you to be completely knowledgeable in everything that you're running into in these internships. Usually that's the case. The thing that I highly recommend for a number of people is to find out more about the company and the position and what they do there. You mentioned here that this is a cybersecurity internship. I don't even know what that is. Nobody knows what that is because there's no such thing as cybersecurity. That's not a thing. It's such a broad term. It sort of is turned out in this term that encompasses all things technologically that are associated with security. Well, that could be looking at code to stop buffer overflows. That could also be you're configuring rules in a firewall. Well, that's two completely types of technologies, one on the computer science side, one on the IT side. And of course, as we already know, those two sides don't meet each other. Those are two completely different jobs. So I guess the first thing would be is to figure out what is this cybersecurity you speak of. And maybe from there, you could start getting some more information. Oh, it's a company and the security is the IT security folks that handle security for the users. Okay, well, we already know then that we'll be dealing with permissions, rights and permissions. We'll be dealing with VPNs. We'll be dealing with encryption. We'll be talking about authentication on our systems, maybe multiple authentication servers. Firewalls are probably in there. IPS functionality in these firewalls, IPsec tunnels, redundancy with these devices, reporting of data that these devices are collecting. So all of that could possibly incorporate topics that would be involved in just one aspect of a cybersecurity internship. Now, how can you prep for it and show you're a good candidate? At that point, I think we talked about this in the last study group, having some tasks that you've already done in your home lab. So have you ever loaded pfSense in a virtual machine and run that firewall? Why haven't you? Especially if you're going to be walking into this internship, it would be great if you could show people what you know about this particular firewall. Show them some of the things you found when you connected this firewall to your internet link. Run some reports that show how much data how many attacks you were able to see from the internet side in an hour on your internet connection. You know, all of these things can show somebody you're not only interested in the technology, but you're also interested in the cybersecurity side of things, certainly the IT security side of things, and you want to know more. You want to work with more of this technology. You want to do more with security. Another good security task might be to load up Active Directory and Windows and start working with the group policy functions and lock a system down. Make it so that they have to have a password that's 10 characters long or more, and make it so that certain aspects, certain things inside of the operating system are disabled. So maybe they can't run certain programs, or maybe they can't install certain applications. How could you set up Windows to do that? We could use group policy. We could use permissions, rights and permissions in the file system itself. We can use Active Directory permissions for that, add people to groups, remove them from groups. If you have not installed a Windows server with Active Directory and then installed a VM for Windows and connected it, then how are you supposed to have that story to tell? So those are two really good security-related tasks that you could do in your home lab. You could download it right now and get both of those running in an hour. You're probably not, though. You're probably something's not going to work right from the beginning. And as I mentioned in the last study group, when something is not working right, you need to document that. One of the great things about working with these technologies and telling the stories of these technologies, especially when you get around a group of folks, it's after hours, you're at the bar, it's an offsite meeting that you're having. Things always wrap around to these stories in the trenches and talk about the worst situation you ran into that dealt with encryption. Oh, you'll never believe what I saw on this IPsec link the other day. They were still using triple DES. Can you believe that? And we can all laugh about it. Yeah, the equipment was ancient. It was 20-year-old firewall running triple DES, and we were upgrading it. And some people say, I didn't even know they were still running triple. So you can have all these conversations. It's a story. So anytime you're installing one of these technologies in your home lab and it's not working, document the story of what was wrong, how you figured out how to fix it, and then what happened after you fix it. That's a 5 to 10 minute conversation you can have with somebody when you're sitting down to talk about a potential internship. That here's a problem I ran into, security related. Here's how I did the research to find out how to resolve the problem. And it was really a 2-minute fix once I figured it out. And then I got it up and running. And then I set up Active Directory and I disabled and turned it into kiosk mode. And we did this. Lots of things you can do at that point. So those are my recommendations. Maybe that can help you as well. If you're somebody who's trying to get a job or an internship, some of those things might help you when you walk in the door. Have those stories available. Make sure you're familiar with those. Other questions. Caliber asks, you didn't mention which Caliber, but Caliber asks, do you offer military/active/reserve/veteran discounts for your products? I absolutely do. Both PDF and physical, yes, I do. For my products, there are discounts available. If you want more information on those and you are a active or inactive military, reserve, veteran, or similar, please send me a note, either as a contact us link on my website, or if you already have a membership, you can leave a ticket, and I'll be glad to give you instructions for those. Other questions, we'll keep going. Other things in this list. We'll keep going on these. The other thing, by the way, as you work through these problems and issues with questions are somewhat challenging sometimes to find the information you might need. So if you ever run into that, there's a lot of great folks over on our Discord too that have also gone through these similar home labs. They might even have some other great ideas too. So make sure you join our Discord if you have questions on those as well. Question, do you know how the exam will be? Is it only multiple choice? Wouldn't it be nice? It used to be only multiple choice, but in the last number of years, CompTIA has added a number of questions right at the beginning, a handful of questions that are performance-based questions. So there will be a number of questions. In fact, people have started their exam and they're noticing the first question was not multiple choice. It took me 15 minutes to get through the first question. And then I got to the second question and it was even more involved, and that took me 15 minutes. And then I went to the third question, and by the time I got through the 4 or 5 performance-based questions, I had 70 multiple choice questions to go through, and I ran out of time. This is a common problem. And then they come out of the exam and go, I was not expecting these more involved questions at the beginning of my exam, because they did not do the research and they did not know there were performance-based questions on this exam. One of the big hints I will always give people is to read through the performance-based questions at the beginning of your exam and then skip them. Read through every single one of them. Skip it. Read through the next one. Go to the next. Read through the next question. Go to the next question. Read through the fourth or last performance-based question, and then go do your multiple choice-based questions. And the reason I say to do that first is that the performance-based questions do tend to take a little bit more time than the multiple choice. If you're ready for them, they won't take a lot of time. But if you've never seen these before, you're unprepared, you've been blindsided when you start the exam because you weren't expecting this, it's going to take longer than it should. So I tell people skip over them, go through the multiple choice. As you go through the multiple choice, you'll start to pick things out. You start to remember things that are in the questions. And some of the things in the multiple choice-based questions might remind you of topics that will help you for the performance-based questions at the beginning, which you will go back to once you have finished all the multiple choice. So there are strategies you can use here that might help you in the exam. That's just one of the many that can help you. But that's a great way to step through, and it's certainly going to be more than multiple choice. You will have many different types of questions that you will have to go through. Fortunately, not a lot of them. So that's the good part, I guess, is you won't run into a ton of them and being able to work through them. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. If you do have a question, by the way, I'm taking questions from the chat room. You can simply type it into the YouTube chat or the chat that's on professormesser.com/live, and I will see them pop up as we go through. I'll try to get through as many of them. This is not an unusual question either. This is a welcome to the family question. Eli asks, I've been struggling a lot with the Linux command line, specifically the VI editor, or perhaps even using Vim on the latest versions of Linux. I just cannot figure out how to maneuver through the documents without destroying them. And as I mentioned, Eli, welcome to the family. Welcome to the club of people that use VI. We love it and we hate it at the same time. It is a fantastic editor. It is powerful. It works extremely well. And it's ubiquitous. It's on practically every Linux distribution you will ever run into. And it's one of the hardest editors to use. Really not use, but one of the hardest editors to learn. There's a bit of a learning curve with VI. And the real secret with VI, I'll give you my quick secret, and you can take this back and start working on it. If you don't know what's happening on your screen, you haven't figured it out, hit the escape button at least twice, and you'll be okay. Everything in VI deals with these commands that you would type in. And you have to know the commands. You have to know that :W writes, :Q quits. It's not intuitive. It's not obvious. And if you type certain buttons in the wrong way, it will delete everything on your screen. Suddenly lines will go missing. Suddenly paragraphs will disappear. Suddenly pages will go blank. And it's very easy to do in VI. The real key is knowing how to work VI so that it does not cause these problems. And you'll have to get comfortable with the process of putting the commands in. And when you do that, and if you're in insert mode, you can't put commands in. And if you put commands in, you better not be in insert mode. There's a lot going on there. So I would highly recommend hitting that escape button a couple times, then putting your : commands in, and you're in much better shape when that happens. That's that number one thing. Hitting that escape a couple times will save you very often. And they've got great help. There's some great videos on VI. There's great tools to learn it. It is a powerful utility. It is extremely useful. And as I mentioned, because it's in Linux everywhere, you can rely that it's going to be there. Either VI or Vim is going to be something that's in your distribution, which makes it very easy to find an editor to work with. And I look forward to your cards and letters telling me about which editors are better, which ones I should be using instead of Vim. And I will tell you right now, you're wrong. Vim really is the best editor. No, use Emacs. No, it's not. You can tell me it's easier, and it certainly looks easier, and it certainly appears that it could be easier. But anybody who uses VI is already so invested into the learning process with VI that we simply cannot bring it to ourselves to admit that anything else would be better. So there you go. It may be or may not be that VI is better, but it doesn't matter because I've spent so much time on it. I refuse to consider anything else. I think that's the sane way to look at anything, really, isn't it? And that describes politics in the modern world. There you go. That is the situation. But in Linux, if we're talking about Linux, certainly we're having a fight. For the life of me, I can't find any other reason you would run Linux unless you were willing to fight with people. That seems to be the reason you would install it. You can tell me if I'm wrong or not. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. I just put those out there. I troll, and we just see if I'm able to get anything on the hook. That's all that is. We'll see next time if I got any great messages on it, and we'll share those with you. Other questions. Let's keep going. The next on our list, I need to scroll back to be able to find these. Other ones that we may be working through. So, this is a good one because it's a challenge to get experience in our industry. And of course, when you're trying to get your first job in IT, you run into that catch-22 situation where everyone wants you to have experience, but you can't have experience unless you have the job, but the job, they won't hire you for the job because you don't have experience. So there's your problem. There's the universal problem you run into with this. Question from the chat room, NX86 asks, do self-study or internships count towards your required experience? Are the skills involved is the skills involved are relevant to what they're asking in a job position? What about private schools other than college? So you said if the skills involved are relevant to what they're asking for in a job position. What about private schools? So here's the problem with that catch-22 is that how do you get some practical experience without getting a job somewhere? Well, there is kind of a middle ground. In the YouTube video description of this video, there is a link to my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video, which I realize that's a long video in the world of YouTube. But as you probably know, my videos are tight. They keep information packed in there. So this is 30 minutes of a really packed full of information kind of video. One of the things I mentioned in that video is employers would like you to have a formal education. They would like you to have some industry certifications. They would love it if you had, they know somebody who works there, or you were familiar with employees who were already part of that organization. And the fourth one is you have some practical experience. Now, I'm sure most employers would like you to have professional experience, which means that you have experience that someone paid you for. But if this is your first job, you don't have that professional experience yet. But you could get practical experience. I gave you some examples earlier about installing Windows Server with Active Directory. I gave you another example of a home lab that you could set up with pfSense and being able to use different firewalls or any open source firewall. It doesn't have to be pfSense. Use anything you'd like. And we came up with some others in our last study group, different types of home labs. I mentioned taking a USB drive, doing a quick format, and then recovering the data on that USB drive. How would you do that? What software would you use? Put some data, put a bunch of data on a USB drive, do a quick format of the USB drive, and then try to recover the data. Did it work? Did it not work? Did you try different methods for recovery, different applications? Which ones worked better? That's a great conversation to have for an internship, for a job that you're going on an interview for. And it's a home lab and something you can do in an afternoon. You can take an hour to do that one. And if you even extend out, let's try different programs to see what they do. Let's load up Linux and load up a copy of a software in Kali. Maybe we'll run the Kali distribution, and it's got tons of tools in there for recovering files. Maybe we run Autopsy, which is a very complex yet powerful utility for storing images and looking through that image for user data. So that was another example I gave the study group a couple of days ago. Is I bought some drives off of eBay that had been formatted, or actually they didn't even mention if they had been formatted or not. I just bought the ones where they didn't even mention them being cleared out, and they sent me drives, and the drives had data on them. And so I loaded up Autopsy, and I went through the data, and I found emails, I found bookmarks, I found browsing history. One of the drives was from apparently from a point of sale terminal, a cash register. There was register transactions inside of it. What a great story to tell if you're sitting down for a security job, and you could say, have you ever sold, what happens to your hard drives once they leave the building? Because here's what happened to me. Here's what I bought on eBay, and you'll never believe what I found. There you go. We just put in a clickbait right there. You won't believe what happens next. And you can take them through the story. In fact, it'd be great if while you were in the room, you prepared for this, right? You have with you some documents you printed out, yes, on paper. I guess you could show it on a tablet, that here's what was on the drive. Here are the types of things. And maybe you made sure you got rid of information that would be sensitive data, but you showed them, look at these transactions. That was freely available on drives that I bought from eBay. And all they had to do, and you can explain, here's what they should have done to protect these drives if they wanted to use them again. And you could talk about the differences between simply formatting or deleting a file versus secure deleting or completely formatting a drive and what the differences might be. There you go. There's another way. So when you're walking into these internships, when you're walking into these opportunities for a security job or a system administrator, bring to the table something interesting to talk about. And it's even better if that thing you're talking about ties directly back to the tasks that would be expected of you for that particular job. I think those are things you can do in an afternoon. And that would be a powerful investment when you start walking into this room. Nobody else is going to have that story. They're not even going to come close. Okay. Other questions on here. Other types of things that would go through. Let me clear out this, and we'll just keep scrolling through our list. This is probably, let me find one that some folks are putting into the list. For those of you wondering, I'm looking at the list of questions coming through from our YouTube chat. That's what I'm sort of scrolling through to figure out the details with it. We'll certainly find out the ones that are there. Other questions that have come in. So this is a pretty good one. And I'm going to try to, since we're sort of our task today has been about minimizing anxiety. Let's talk about Braders, who says, what is the pass mark for the exam? As in, how many questions will I need to get correct to actually pass? I find this certainly helps with levels of anxiety, and it should help with levels of anxiety, but I'm about to show you how it won't. I'm about to show you how you can take that one right off the table. If you're hoping to somehow get more insight into the grading process, I'm going to show you how you never will. So we're going to go back to a slide that I bring up first in the study group over an hour ago. And it's about the exam. So this is the part I want to look at. It's the exam requirements. 90 minutes once the exam starts. Let's say we're taking the 220-1102. And so you would have to get a 700. That's the score. But it's on a scale from 100 to 900. So is it 800 points? So does that mean I need to make 600 out of 800? Or how does that work? And some questions are going to be partial credit and some are not. Maybe. We don't know. And there's no way to tell. And there's no way to know afterwards either. And on top of that, each question is worth a different number of points. So therefore, you can't calculate how many questions must be correct in order to pass this exam. Because you think you'd be able to. At the end, you can count through 100. I know 100% that I got these questions right. That means of these 75 questions I got on my exam, or 90 questions, or whatever they gave me, I think I have enough to pass. But you don't know. There's no way to know, because each question's worth a different number of points. What if the questions you know you got right were the ones worth the least? That means that you'd need more points to pass. If you answered another different set of questions correctly that were worth more points, you would pass. So that's your problem. At the end of the exam, you can go and log into your CompTIA account and you can look at the results from your exam. These exam results will tell you which sections you got questions wrong. So it might tell you, let's bring this up. In fact, I'm going to bring up a set of the exam objectives because I have these right here. So here's a good example. This is from, that's not it. There's a good example. This is the 1102 exam objectives. So Section 2 Security, Section 2.1, summarize various security measures and their purposes. So for physical security, you need to know about access control vestibules, badge readers, video surveillance, alarm systems, motion sensors, door locks, etc., etc. Look at how many bullets there are just in this one single topic. In fact, if you go to my course, there are probably 4 or 5 different videos just from that one section. And you have to know everything in this section at least for your exam. Now, what if you got a question on email, and then let's highlight with our highlighter here. So let's say you got a question on email, you got a domain question in your exam, you got a question about door locks. Let's say you got 3 questions on your exam, and when you got a question about door locks, a question about email, and a question about domains. When you look at the results of your exam, it says you may have gotten 1 or more questions wrong from Section 2.1, summarize various security measures and their purposes. Okay, but there were 3 questions. Which one did I get wrong? I don't know. They aren't going to tell you. You never see the questions again. You never see the answers again. Once you submit the exam, it's gone forever. You will never see it. All you know is that you sort of remember there were 3 questions from this section, and you got at least one of them wrong, but you don't know which one that was. So this is the situation where you really don't know how many questions to get right. And at the end of the exam, you don't know if you got them right or not. So what I will tell you speaking, and I mentioned there's a link here to anxiety, is that when you start getting into trying to duplicate the grading process, or trying to understand more about the grading process, or trying to find a strategy that works with the grading process, is a big waste of your time. And it adds more anxiety to the entire process, because you will never know the grading process they used. You will never know how many points a question is worth. You will never know if you got a particular question right or wrong. You think you know, but you'll never know for sure. So I will tell you, don't spend your time trying to reverse engineer the grading process in the hopes that it's going to provide you with some type of strategic advantage, because ultimately there's no way to do it. And if you do come up with some type of formula in your mind, it may not be accurate. It may be the wrong formula. It may not be good at all to follow that particular path. So the way that I say you should approach this is you release it into the universe. You let it go. You don't let it have anything to do with the exam process. Ultimately, if you know your content, you know the material, you know the bullets from the exam objectives, you've done your studying, the score on the exam is going to take care of itself. And it's going to be whatever it is. And by the way, if you pass your exam, here's what happens. Or even better, if you fail your exam, here's what happens. Nothing. Nothing happens. You just failed it. That was it. We have all failed industry certification exams before. I have failed one exam multiple times until I finally got it right. This happens all the time. And if you fail your exam, what you do is you study a little bit more, you buy another voucher, and you go take your exam again. And you just keep taking it until you pass it. So there's no penalty for failing. If anything, there's an advantage for failing, because now you've been through the process. Now you've seen some of the questions. You have more of a feel for the style of the exam. You understand more about the testing center you're in or at home. You understand more about the software that's used during the exam. There's actually advantages now. You've actually learned something during the exam process. And the second time you take the exam, a lot of the stuff you worried about before, now it's not a worry. Now you know what to expect. You walk in the room. We're not even sitting through the first 15 minutes of the candidate agreement. We're starting. Let's go. And now you step through it. So it can only be helpful for you to take these exams. What you don't want to do is have that fear of the unknown or the fear of failure, because there's nothing bad about failing these exams. It's something that you have to work through whenever that failure comes up, but you really only fail if you stop. If you are still studying and you're just going to take it again, well, buy another voucher, go take the exam again. That's what you should be doing. And that's not failure. That's a win, because you're going to earn your certification. It's a pass-fail score. So that's what I would recommend too. Don't worry about the exam process. Don't worry about the grading process. Don't even try to put your head in that space. I'm going to figure out how they do the grading and we're going to figure out don't do it. Just don't even bother, because you'll never be able to know for sure. The real key is sit down, know your stuff, sit down in the exam and just crush it. And if you don't pass the first time, go back, reset, go do it again. In fact, the exam results you get should be some pretty good intel, because it will tell you which sections you got a question wrong in. And you may find there are certain sections or certain domains you can study up more than the others. So it may allow you to readjust what sections you may have realized, wow, I got a lot wrong in security. I thought I knew security really well, but that was the section I missed the most on. Let's go back and study harder on that section and we'll pass it the next time through. So there's always a silver lining to this, and that's the silver lining to failing an exam, is that now you've got intel you can use to go back and crush it next time. Other questions. This is from Dennis, who asks, do I have a library of IT books? I don't have any physical IT books anymore. I used to keep quite a library of IT books. You know, back before they had the internet, we had books. That's how we didn't have a Google to go to. We did not have any online electronic resource that we could ask any question to and it would find the answer for us, or at least something that would approach the answer. We had to buy books and keep those books on the shelf so that if something happened in Windows, we could pull that book down and say, what are they talking about? Active Directory, what? Let me go, okay. I have to find that section. Oh, here it is. And it talks about, okay, we need to replicate. It's got to, okay, I'll find the forest. We did, got it. Okay. And we put the book back on the shelf and we go through the steps. These days, of course, there are certainly some fantastic IT books out there. And if you are trying to focus on a particular niche, they can be very, very valuable. One of the best books I ever got was one on DNS from O'Reilly. And I don't remember which animal it was on the front. And I bet I still have that book around here somewhere, because there's like 2 or 3 books I refuse to ever get rid of. And that was one of them. And it was so good because it was this enormous thick book. And I thought, it's DNS. How hard can DNS be? This is what people say when they get into the industry. Well, how hard can that be? And then you start reading the book on DNS and you realize, oh, everything uses this. The entire world would stop if DNS disappeared. And as we say online, if there's ever a problem, if you walk in on a Monday and something isn't working, if you are called in the middle of the night because something is broken, it's DNS. Is it DNS? Yes, it's DNS. I really don't think that it's DNS. It's totally DNS. But that's sort of it's sort of said jokingly that it's DNS, but it's remarkable how often it's DNS, because there's so many moving parts under the surface. So if I had to, I bet I've got that library. I've got that book around here somewhere in my life. I wouldn't really call it a library. It's stuck in a box somewhere. And I never pull it out anymore, because obviously there are electronic versions of these books available at your local library, online, and in other places. In fact, you should really check your local library to see if they have subscriptions to some of these services. You may find they already have a subscription to O'Reilly, and you can pull down every book they've got and read about HTTP and read about SQL Server and read about Windows and read about DNS. And they're all there. So some great stuff there. Obviously, there's tons of great resources on the YouTube. And now with videos and video training, I'm obviously a big proponent of that. but it has to be tempered with the right amount of study materials from other places as well. There's some great stuff out there. And I think that's my library now, is the internet. I think that's probably that way for most people, is it's now the internet is our library. Don't really keep much books around at that point anyway. I do have some. What books do I have on my tablet? Let's see what I've collected through the years, shall we? I'm going to bring up my iBooks. I'm not going to show you my iBooks, but I'll tell you what's in here. So in my iBooks, if I spell it right, I guess it's just called books, isn't it? They don't call it iBooks anymore. So in my books, I've got a number of ones here. The first one that comes up is a book on Bitcoin. You can tell I was doing some cryptography work, creating some new materials. So there was one that's technology. What other books do I have in here that are technical books? Is that the only technical book I have right now? I cleaned it out recently for a trip, and I don't think I have any other technical books. I wonder what's in the cloud. Where's my cloud? Cloud. All. So here's some others that I have here. So interestingly enough, I have Professor Messer's Security Plus course notes. I always test my materials on my tablet. So my stuff's on here. That's easy. I've got exam objectives on here. I have a book on, you keep going. I have a book on CCNA iOS commands. I don't think I've touched it since I downloaded it, but there it is. I'm always looking for something interesting in that way. I've got a book on, I've got some 800 series A+ books from 10 years ago, something like that. This is how long it's been since I've been in my library. I do have some Cisco certification materials because I was doing some Cisco certs, not training certs. I was getting a Cisco cert. That was back in the days when I needed to get a Cisco cert to do something else. And obviously I don't need a Cisco cert any longer. That was there. And a couple of books on, there were some programming books I was looking at earlier because I was thinking about what would it take to create an app that would do this. This is one of those things, you're in the shower and you're thinking, I got a great idea for an app. Let's see what it would take to write this app. And then I read the books and I realized there's a lot that goes into writing an app, and perhaps I won't be doing that right now. But I have a list of apps. If anybody wants to, no, I'm not even going to do that. I'm not even going to get into the world of app creation. Let's concentrate on creating content for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus right now. And I think we're going to be okay. Let's keep going with others there. Obviously, that's kind of a sad little bookshelf. You can tell how much I read. Most of the time I'm creating content. So I don't have a lot of time to watch television. I don't have a lot of time to read books. If somebody asked me what's the last book I read, I don't know that I'd have an answer for them because I can't remember what the last book I read happened to be. Long time. It's interesting because I just saw that Apple has released a new series called Silo, and it's based on a book that I read 15 years ago, I think. The book was called Wool. It was a incredibly popular self-published book, which was another reason I was so interested in it, being someone who self-publishes. And fantastic book, fantastic series of books. I was telling Mrs. Professor Messer, oh yeah, I read that book. And she looked at me like I was crazy. Like, you did what? You read a book? Like back in the day when I used to fly on a plane and get on a car and just travel all the time and spend the night in hotels, I did used to have books that I would read on my mobile phone and on my tablets. So that was like the last time I read a book was 15 years ago. Isn't that bad? I don't think getting a book on Active Directory or reading through a book on security or reading on a book on IPsec or reading a book on DNS, I don't think that counts as reading a book. I know it is, but to me, reading a book is something that is you do in your leisure time when you're at the beach kind of thing. You're on vacation, just sit back and read a book. I just haven't done that in a while. So there you go. That's a completely pointless task of me going through my books to see what's in there, and it turns out not so much in there. Some folks even in the chat room going, you don't even watch sports? You don't watch, apparently there's some sports ball that's currently happening that I am not involved with. So no, I don't watch any of the sports. I like sports. I played sports all the way through school. I was on the basketball team, but I wasn't good. So I was the free throw champion one year, but that was it. That's about as simple as basketball gets. Stand in one place and shoot. I got that. We're good. Oh, now we have to move. Oh, it screws up everything. Now we can't play. I didn't do bad. I was pretty good at basketball, but not good enough to do anything with it. Let's be clear. I know my limitations. At some point, you can't do any more of that. I like that. Was I a good 3-point shooter? Back when I played basketball, there were no 3-point. There you go. The old guy really sets the calendar right there. Yeah, 3. I guess I would have been. I like shooting from the outside, but there were no lines because we did not have them. They did not exist. See? At the time, there was no internet. Again, just so you're clear. Finally, something that we definitely will not fight about. Matthew asks, do you prefer Windows or macOS? I like both, actually. I think Windows 11 is great. People will complain about it. I think it's fine. But my daily driver is macOS, the thing that I use the most. If we look at, let's give you a view from the bird cam. In the bird cam, you can see there's a system right in front of me and the system to my right. These are the same machine, just 2 monitors that I have here. It's a Mac Studio. You can see the Mac Studio right behind my tablet. You can see it much better on the bird cam than I can see it because my tablet's in the way. So that's what's driving these two. And then I've got a MacBook Pro that's showing you the slides. That's all it's doing. It's a little bit overkill for a MacBook Pro, but I've had this sitting around. It's like 10 years old and it works great. So that's what we use for the slides. And then way over here, this is a piece of hardware. It's a switching unit from Blackmagic. It is their Blackmagic Studio 4K, something like that. And it is, I don't even know what it runs inside. It's not Windows. It's probably some Linux or similar kernel. So that's what this machine and monitor is doing. It's really all the machine is in the switcher itself. So it's on all-in-one unit. It's not just the buttons, but inside the unit itself is all of the technology. And then on the right side is a simple screen that is showing you the output from a streaming hardware that I have down here. It's this Blackmagic streaming hardware device that's down here at the bottom. I need to dust in there. It's very dusty. And so that's what's showing here. I think that's also Linux-based, but I don't know for sure. It's a purpose-built appliance. This is a purpose-built appliance. Not only do I not know what's inside of them, I do not care because it's simply performing a single function for me. So my daily driver is macOS, but I have Windows running on other devices and Windows VMs that I use, especially for my A+. And in fact, if you watch my A+ my A+ video on Active Directory, that's part of the 1102, that's all done in VMs. So it's running on a Mac, but it's running Windows 11 on a Mac or Windows Server on a Mac, just in a virtual machine. And if you're on ProfessorMesser.com or you use any of the services that surround ProfessorMesser.com, it's Linux. I know you didn't ask specifically about Linux, but I think it's valuable for technologists to know the most they can about these 3 popular operating systems. So if you can get your hands on Windows, on macOS, and on Linux, you should at least get familiar enough with those operating systems to know where things are and how to get in and troubleshoot those particular systems. I'm my own administrator. I'm the system administrator for my website, for my database servers, for my caching servers, for my load balancers, for everything I use. And I run Linux mostly on those infrastructure devices, Windows for some of the training systems, and I have Windows on an older streaming server that's in the back that I have as a backup, and mainly macOS as my daily driver. Mostly because I could never get Windows to not reboot on its own after installing drivers or updates. So I would set my system up. I did some video editing. I set up 6 videos to render. Back in the day, this took a long time to render some of these videos. So I would tell it to work overnight. I'd go, and I'd walk out of the studio for the night. And I'd go to sleep, and I'd wake up in the morning, and I'd come into my studio and find that an hour after I walked out, Windows installed an update and rebooted the system, and the render stopped. So the entire night was wasted. Got nothing done. And I thought, well, that's not good. Let me tell Windows, do not install these updates automatically. Do not reboot the system ever. Go. Oh, glad that's fixed. And then the next time that I did a long render, I set it to render overnight. I walked out of the studio. I walked in the next day. And an hour after I had left, it installed an update and rebooted the system. And I did more studies, I did more reviews and said, why did Windows reboot? And everybody said, oh, yeah, you can tell it not to do that. And you could tell it to prevent it from rebooting, but it doesn't pay any attention to that. It does it anyway. And at that point, I was done with Windows and I dropped it and I went to macOS. That's the only reason. Well, it wasn't the only reason, but that was the biggest reason. It turns out it was a pretty good move, especially from a security perspective. And when I began working with companies in a security role as a security systems engineer, they handed us MacBook Pros because they knew that was a more secure environment for somebody on the road to work with these technologies than running Windows on a laptop. And we can fight about that one too. But if on a preference, if it's a service or technology that needs Windows, I'm running Windows. Do you have a gaming system? Of course you do. You're running Windows. For Mac OS, it's my daily driver. It's what I do everything on. Everything you see here is built on Mac OS, but I make sure it also will run on Windows and works perfectly on Windows as well because we use all of them. So it just makes sense. Do I plan on making study guides for any vendor-specific certifications? Joe asks. I have lots of plans. I got plenty of plans. I have a huge list of things that I would like to do. And some of those, in fact, most of those are for technologies that are specific to a particular manufacturer. So there could be Microsoft and Azure. It could be AWS from Amazon. It could be Cisco related materials. It could be Oracle. It could be Microsoft SQL Server. There could be tons of different ones. I'm not locked in or have any exclusivity to any particular technology. I can do anything I'd like whenever I'd like. The real challenge, of course, is physics. How many hours are in a day? How many days in a week? How many days, how many weeks in that year? That's the problem, is finding the time to do as much as I wish I had the ability to do. So I have in my list a number of things that I would like to do for additional certifications. It's everything you would think it would be, I guess. There's nothing too exciting in there. Pick all the most popular certifications and other technologies in the world, and that's what I would work on. That's what I would use. So I think that would be pretty useful to have those there. Question about so any macOS version I would recommend? I don't know. Whatever the latest is. That's one of the nice things about technologies and being able to work with them. The version, yeah, we got the weird message that pops up on the screen there. I got to work on hiding the ones that are there. That's not supposed to be there, but that's okay. We'll be fine. You'll work through it. Any macOS version I recommend. What am I running here? Let's find out. On my Mac, if we look at my Mac Studio, let's have a look at the Mac Studio. Where is it? It's right here. Let me put me up on the screen. So this is my Mac Studio. It's an M1 Ultra, 128 gig of memory. I'm running Ventura 13.3.1a. Don't know what that means, but that's what I'm running. So that's the system that is running pretty much everything as my daily driver. Plenty of good stuff there too. So if you're someone who is, usually they do a pretty good job on macOS of keeping everything up to date and bringing them through. I guess the real challenge, I just got that security update with the A on the end. People in the chat room going, yep, the A is that security thing they put out. Sure is. And I loaded it up pronto and getting it there. And so Matthew says, oh, well, in macOS, the updates don't stop after 5 years like Windows. They do not. Now, eventually, the hardware that you have will be end-of-lifed, and there will no longer be updates released for that particular hardware. You won't be able to update it to a new version of an operating system, and eventually they will stop security releases for that version. But they're pretty good about supporting years into the past. So by the time your system is no longer supported, you probably would not want to run that system anyway. So it works out. So no, they don't have an update stopping after 5 years, but it does stop after a certain amount of time. I don't know what the end-of-life policy is for Apple. Everybody's is a little bit different, but it might be. Maybe it is 5 years. Maybe I've just not realized it because I get a new computer every 3 years or so, and so I just don't notice when it's there. Other questions. Do I recommend TestOut for A+? I technically have never seen it. I've heard about it. TestOut is a company that makes testing and training materials for primarily focused on the K through 12 school. They have other clients as well, but that was their big claim to fame. That's the number that they have is they got a lot of customers who are in that particular place. But I will tell you, you can stop calling it TestOut now. You can start calling it CompTIA because CompTIA in January of this year purchased TestOut. So TestOut is now CompTIA. CompTIA is now TestOut. They're now the owner of TestOut. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. I did have a meeting with CompTIA, just an update meeting recently where they said, hey, did you see the news? What do you think? Those types of things. But they weren't able, at least, they don't know exactly what the strategy will be quite yet for working with those products. We don't know if they're going to switch all of their products over to the TestOut engines. We don't know if they get rid of all the TestOut stuff and only take maybe they bought TestOut just for the list of customers. Customer lists are valuable. But it's now all CompTIA. So it's not a third party anymore. It's all the CompTIA breakdown. I think not much has changed at the moment, but of course things will change over the coming months, certainly. You can't just buy a company and then not do anything. So something will happen for those and to make those happen. Let's talk about the performance-based question that we had today. It was about the malware steps. And there are a lot of comments during that performance-based question about why would you do this, and this doesn't make sense, and what if you can't get rid of the malware, as Dennis posits here, considering that performance-based question. If we can't remove the malware, is it better to format the computer? Well, it may be if you want to have access to this computer again. And as I mentioned, the best way to deal with malware, I mentioned this in my videos too, is you delete everything on the computer and you restore it from a known good backup, or you reinstall new from trusted installation materials that do not have malware. That's what that means. Somebody's asked me, what do you mean by known good? I mean backups that don't have an infected malware instance on them. And that's truly the best practice for not removing malware, but it's a best practice for dealing with malware is to nuke everything and reinstall. In fact, that's the only way that you can 100% guarantee that you remove the malware is you remove everything. Even in the process of going through that malware removal steps, you may think that you removed 100%. And if you talk to people that do this and they remove malware in this way by removing it from a system, they will always tell you, always, that they are 100%. They got everything on that system. How do you know that? Are you sure? 100%? Could there be any chance at all that perhaps there's some malicious code still on that system that your removal program didn't know about? Is there a chance? Yeah, there's a chance. Okay, well, if there's a chance, we're not going to take it. We're nuking the whole thing, and we're going to start from scratch. That really is the best reason or the best process for removing, not really removing malware. Technically, it's removing malware. It's for recovering that system back to a workable state. But one of the things that I find interesting about this is that there is this process they have in the CompTIA exam objectives for removing malware, except most of the people in the industry would tell you that's not what you do. You just nuke it, reimage, and keep moving. Nuke it, reimage, and keep moving. Because you can reimage in a matter of minutes. You can delete and reimage the system. 30 minutes later, this person's back up and running, and your system, everybody's efficient again. Everybody's doing their job. So that is, for the most part, the proper process. But as I mentioned, there may be times when this system now is not booting properly. It's got malware on it, but there's some software on there or some data files you must remove. You've got to take them off of there. It's mission critical. Otherwise, we've lost a week of work. It's a competitive situation. We don't have the time. You got to get that file. Okay, well, let's step through this process to try to remove as much as we can so that we can now regain access to the system and be able to remove the data files. At which point, and I think this is the 8th step that they don't give you, is once you've done all of this and you've educated the user, you nuke everything and you recover from a known good backup. Ultimately, that's what most people will do anyway. So I would highly recommend doing that. I think that's a good way to do it. So if you're someone who's working through trying to figure it out, I think that's a pretty important one. It's pretty important to be able to work through this. Other questions. Let's keep going. In here, let's keep going through the other ones that happen to be there. I had a question that I saw earlier, so I'm just going to scroll up a little bit, try to gain access. The chat software that YouTube uses changes constantly, and it's a real challenge sometimes to flip through and find the things we need to do. I need a better way to submit questions. I can just kind of pop through them, but we'll worry about that at some other time. I'm welcome. I'll take your suggestions if you have any of those. Other questions that came up, I'm going to keep scrolling up. There are a number of you that understand the world of collecting books and not having the internet. So solidarity to the other old folks out there. Congratulations. There is something about physical books, though. Alex mentions this in the chat, says, I just don't like reading books online. And I get that. Reading books on a tablet or reading books on your phone or reading books on a screen is different than having a physical book in your hands. It was one of the reasons that, when I first introduced my practice exams and my course notes, I released them as digital products and said, well, who's going to buy a physical book? Who's going to want to hold a physical book? And I mentioned this to Mrs. Professor Messer, and I said, well, I've got these course notes that are digital, and somebody asked me today if I had a physical version of that. Can you believe a physical book? Ha ha. And she goes, no, that'd be great. Because she likes physical books. She likes the feel and the flipping through and drawing on that and touching. And there's something tactile about studying. There's something that it fires a different synapse for her if it's this physical thing you can touch. And I had not thought about it that way. And so I said, well, okay, well, I'll just put the option out there. It costs more money to print. There's, resources, but I live in a part of the world where we grow trees just for this. Like there's an enormous industry around paper, and it's a renewable resource. We're not going to run out of paper because we can always grow trees and we can do it very well. So I thought, well, I'll just create the option of getting physical books. And it turns out a lot of people agree that they would prefer the physical book over the digital. I think that's reasonable. So that's one that I thought was an idea I had not thought of, but as many people will tell you, when you're kind of figuring it out, when you're running a business and you're trying to figure out what do people need, you don't always know. You kind of have to ask others, what do you think about this? And sometimes there's those things you just miss. And somebody has to explain to you, no, you dummy, you need a physical book. What's wrong with you? Get a physical book for the people who like the physical books. Oh, you're right. I was kind of myopic there. So we'll figure that out and work through them. Dennis has found the DNS book that I use. DNS and BIND is the book that I used. And if you're somebody, it's a good book if you are in charge of the DNS server. If you just want an overview of DNS, it's way overkill. It's super overkill. But if you want to know everything there is to know about managing a DNS server, it is excruciatingly complete and doing all of that. And it's a great resource also. I like that book. Has some good stuff in it. So thank you for finding it. I think that's a good one to have there. We're coming up on, I'm way over time on this. So let's do two things here. There's a couple of questions that I saw come in. This first one's pretty good from Computer Learner, which we all are. Asks, how long should it take to prepare for both the 1101 and I think you mean 1102 exams? So those are the two most recent, most current A+ exams. So the 1101 and 1102, I find that the average for these exams, this would be for most people, is somewhere around 2 to 3 months is the average it takes to prepare for each of those. So if you were taking both, it would be somewhere around 4 to 6 months of study. Now that is an average. It's a very broad representation of everyone because people that come in to take these exams, some people have been in this industry a long time and they might be able to read through the 1101 exam objectives. They're already familiar with these technologies. They've been using these technologies a long time. And so they'll find the places where they need a little more help. They read through those chapters. 2 weeks later, they take the exam and they pass. 2 weeks for one of those A+ exams. That is, for someone who's in the industry, that's not crazy. That's a relatively good starting point for somebody who's very familiar. But if you ask me how long it took me to take my first A+ exam and then my second A+ exam, and how long did it take? I think it took about 6 months for me to get both of those done because I've got another job I'm doing during the day. I come home at night. There's tasks for me to do. Let's get the kids to bed. Let's get the dogs fed. Let's finally sit down for an hour. And that's all I've got. I've got an hour or two maybe that I can focus on these materials. Read, study, lab, question. And we just do the same thing tomorrow. So instead of me sitting down for an entire 8-hour session during a day and reading through, I get 1 hour. Okay, it's going to take me 8 times as long than someone who's got 8 hours in a day. So there's your problem. It's more of a time motion study than anything. That's why it takes me so long to get through this material, because when I take one of these certification exams, I'm most comfortable when I really understand it. I don't mean like have a basic memorization of port numbers. I want to know, how do those port numbers work? What do they look like on the network? Where do I configure them in the software? How can I change a port number if I want to? What if I try to attach to a service and the port number is different? How would I find the port number if it was different? You know, that's a lot in my head going around when all it really needs me to know is that SSH is 22. So that I really got to know about SSH. Well, can I start my own SSH? How does it work? What does it look like? What do the packets look like? Let's do a packet capture. How do I protect it? How do I set it up for authentication? How can I set it up for certificate-based authentication rather than password-based authentication? Now I'm way out of scope. They're never going to ask me about that on the exam. They just want to know if SSH is 22 and what it does. But sometimes I go a little bit deeper than I need to go because it helps me know more about the technology. So that's why if you're in that same boat and you're trying to prepare for these exams, you can stick to the exam objectives. You can get through these, each exam in approximately 2 to 3 months, sometimes longer if you don't have the time. But that should be a pretty good guideline for most of us. I think anyone who does get one of those exams done in 2 weeks, they're able to get through the entire 2 courses in a month. That's an unusual and I'd say relatively aggressive schedule. I think it's more important if you're able to know the material, get into all of this, understand what they're trying to have you do, and then go take the exam. Sometimes that's a month, sometimes it's 6. It just depends on how you study, when you study, and how much of this that you walk in the door already knowing before you start your studies. I think it's important too. Other questions. Let's see what's here. And this may be a good one. Let's see. I saw one that's there. And I need to scroll. Thank you, YouTube chat, for doing this to me. Let's keep going. And this is good, by the way. I need to, if you ever see this, I want a picture of it. Dennis says, I saw a man reading your Security Plus book at the airport. I'd love to see a picture of this. I've had people tell me before, oh, I've been reading your stuff forever. And they talk about someone else's products. I'm like, well, maybe you weren't reading my stuff forever. Maybe you were reading that person's stuff forever. It sometimes happens. The pine, what about the pine? People want to know about the pine trees now. And I live in a part of Florida where the couple of counties over, there is an annual pine tree festival. We do a lot of festivals in this country. We love our festivals. And usually our local cities, where I grew up, we had a watermelon festival. The next county over was Pine Tree Festival. The county north of us was a Rose Festival. So in my part of the world, I grew up in a very agricultural area, non-technical area, and this happens all the time. So I do know a little bit about the pine tree industry just because there are so many families and people I know in this area who are connected to the logging and pine tree, the pine tree business, the whole thing. Some of it's about driving trucks. Some of it's about cutting the trees. Some of it's about working at in the logging equipment. Maybe it's at the plants. Maybe it's distribution, or maybe it's just Dunder Mifflin and they're just selling the paper. It's one of those situations where it's a whole circle there, and it all happens out here in the woods, quite literally, to get the paper to you. And that's one of those. And I have family members who have plots of land growing trees on it, and they grow the trees for 7 to 10 years, cut it down at 7 to 10 years, and then grow them again. And it's just a cycle they do over and over and over again, and relatively profitable. So maybe that's what we should focus on. Our next study group is all about agriculture. No more computers. Well, they actually, as with everything else, they have an IT department. There's lots of technology behind the world of growing pine trees. So it doesn't matter. You're going to hit IT anywhere you go. There's always something in the technology world that you're going to find, regardless of what the business is. Other questions? I think maybe we can get another one. There's a few. I will mention, and some people are using this as well. And somebody made a mention about it in one of the things I saw go by. But our Discord, the Professor Messer Discord, we have study events going on there all the time. They're not scheduled study events. Most of the time, I'm not even involved in them. It's all of you getting together into a chat room or into a voice room or into a video room and studying the material, whether it's watching the videos together and commenting and trying to parse out some of the things I'm telling you, sometimes people going over questions they have, sometimes just talking about the exam objectives. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely be part of our Discord. You can pop in there practically any time of the day, and there is a room open with people talking. If there isn't, I have built into my Discord this dynamic room creation process where all you have to do is click on the very first audio room, which says click here for your own audio room, and it pops you out into your own managed room that you control. So you can decide who's let in. You can decide if somebody needs to be kicked out. You can decide to open it up to the world, and then you can allow people to present, to talk, to discuss. It is a great opportunity to talk to other people who are studying the same thing as you. And if you run across questions or things about the technology, you want some more clarification, there are a number of people out there on our Discord that have already gone through these classes. They've already got their certification, and they're already working in the field. So they may have additional insights in some of these that either I just don't have time to put into my video course, or it's one that they can actually speak from a position of, oh, I do this every day, and here's what we do with it. So that's kind of my final recommendation to you today is if you want even more and you need something to kind of add a little accent to the studies that you're doing today and perhaps even speed the process a little bit for you, there's a lot of like-minded folks there. You can find it all at professormesser.com/Discord. Well, I think that's a great place to kind of stop for today. I want to thank everyone for being here in the first hour where I got to ask you questions from the exam. We do that again next month, so make sure you check the calendar, professormesser.com/calendar, if you ever want to know when the next live event is going to be. If you like this video, I want to recommend again that you give us a thumbs up. Thank you so much also for doing that. We really do appreciate it. And thank you for all your support throughout the month. We could not do this without you. Thank you for the messages you send. Thanks for the things you say in Discord. And that's where we will be once we're done here is over on Discord. We'd love for you to join us at professormesser.com/Discord. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you next time on the A+ study group.